This evening our invocation is being delivered by Pastor Wes Wilmer of Sanctuary with Christian Missionary Alliance of Hudson. What we'll do is what we always do. We'll stand for the invocation, and after the invocation then we'll face the flag and say the Pledge of Allegiance. So Pastor Wilmer, if you will lead us in invocation, please.
Let's pray. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, I pray that you would send your spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice to these public servants. Help them to hold those that they serve in higher regards than they hold themselves. And in doing so, would you bring about a life of well-being to the people that live in St. Croix County, that live and work and visit St. Croix County. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will next take the roll.
Here. Brian Hurchin. Here. Julie Spear. Here. Joe Hurchin. Here. Bill Peavy is possibly going to be late. Jerry Peterson.
Here.
Charlie Grant. Here. Tom Dowd. Here. Chuck Mells. Here. Dick King. Here. Wallace Habhager. Here. John Mortensen. Here. Esther Wentz. Here. Gene Ritz. Here. Gordon Awesome. Here. Tom Kaflish. Here. Chuck Strumke. Here. Richard Marzoff. Here. Sharon Norton Bauman. Here. Ron Troyer. Here. Roger Rebholtz. Here. Bill Cranmer. Here. Daryl Standifer. Here. John Borup. Here. Clarence Malick.
Here.
Don Jordan. Here. Ron Raymond.
Here.
Cindy Leonard. Here. Linda Lucky. Here. Stan Kruger.
Here.
Denise Gunderson.
30 of us here. Mr. Peavy may be late. Let's now have the recognition of the Hudson Girls Track and Field Team. I think, Mr. Troyer, you're prepared to introduce them and proceed with the recognition.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure as the Hudson supervisor to welcome tonight to our meeting the Hudson Girls Track and Field Team, the 2007 state champions of Division I. So ladies, if you'd come forward with Coach Jamie Holm, we'd like to invite you all to come down front. To read the local papers, you know how spectacular this was. Not only do we have 3 individual state champions, but a team championship that exceeded the other schools in Division I. We're very proud of them. They've really brought something to Hudson that we're proud of. We wanted to share that tonight. So Coach Holm, I'm going to turn it over to you.
We would just like to thank all of you for inviting us here tonight. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the girls introduce themselves and say what event they ran at state and how they did.
Hi, my name is Sharon Dahl, and I competed in the 100-meter hurdles, and took 5th place this year, and I also competed in the 300-meter hurdles, and I won that event. So.
Miss Smith, come here. Now, this young lady is going on scholarship to the University of Minnesota. Yeah. Go Gophers!
Hi, my name is Alex Johnson, and I competed in the pole vault, and I won.
Hi, my name is Katie Cumming, and I ran in the mile, and I took 4th, and then I competed in the 4x8 with Kristen, Ashley, and Nicole, and we took 3rd, and then I ran the 2 mile, and I placed 1st.
Okay, as Katie said, well, I ran the 2 mile also, and I also was part of the 4x8 team and placed 3rd place with them. So.
My name is Corey Vout, and I was an alternate for the 4x8 team.
My name is Haley Fletcher, and I placed 22nd in high jump.
My name is Megan Zeiss, and I was part of the 4x2 team that placed 21st.
My name is Hannah Spott, and I was an alternate for the 4x2.
My name's Rachel Sadoff, and I ran in the 4x2 that placed 21st.
And we are missing a few of the girls tonight, and we did not get a chance to bring along the trophy tonight, but we have a nice large poster to show you what they look like standing up on the podium receiving it. If you guys want to sketch that. There they are, and And like I said to the school board last week, not only do we strive to get the girls individually as far as they can get during the season, but it's also a team sport, and this is just a culmination of the girls' individual hard work throughout the season and for some of them over the past 4 years. So we'd like to again thank you for inviting us here tonight. The girls really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations. Tonight we're going to have a report given to us by Judge Vlack and Assistant District Attorney McQuillan, and in the interest of their schedule, I propose to do that as the very next thing. So Judge Vlack and Dave McQuillan, if you are prepared to give us your comments respecting the drug court and such things, we are ready to listen.
Those of you who know me know I will be very, very brief. So I want to introduce two people. First, Dave McQuillan. He's an assistant district attorney. Without his initiative, I don't think we would have had a drug court. And also Ms. Amber Perry. She is our drug court coordinator. She became involved in the drug court as a treatment person and then became the coordinator. She's very enthusiastic. She's a perfect person for the position. In May, I talked with Mr. Malik about giving a very brief report because in April of last year, we had our first drug court session, and I thought after a year it might be a good time to have a report. Logistically, we couldn't do it in May. Ironically, we're here tonight, and it was actually 2 years from this month when we sat down with a group of people to say, let's consider a drug court. The very first meeting, I sat there thinking, this isn't going to happen. We've got about 15 different people, 15 different ideas, where are we going to go? And trust me, since that time, even though we've started, there's many days I go home thinking, what have I gotten myself into? But I just want to thank you very much for your support. Doing a drug court is a very unique experience. It's not like a regular courtroom setting. These people come in, they are addicted to some substance, they need some type of structure in their lives, they've gone through treatment, they've done this before, been there, done that. If they don't make it in drug court, they're going to be in prison. It's that simple. You do a lot of important things in these meetings. You'll do far more important things tonight than listening to my report. For the people who come to drug court, that's the most important day of their week. If they don't make it that day, they're not going to make it. They appreciate your support. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, please contact me. I think Mr. McCohen has a few words.
Now, I, on my desk, found a written report. Was that distributed to everyone?
Everybody should got a copy of the report, yes.
Okay, good. Back to you, Dave.
I think most of you know that this effort started out as part of the methamphetamine crisis, if you will. And I believe you all saw the video last week, and we alluded to it in the video. I have never seen the community come together on an issue the way we saw the community come together to fight methamphetamine. It has been extraordinary, and it is something that I hope that we can keep going. You know, we have made progress on the methamphetamine front. Our cases are down for the first time in years. There's still a lot of methamphetamine on the street, but I don't believe that we're seeing as many new users as we have in the past, and I think that's where the downtrend is. And the reason I think we're not seeing new users is because of the actions of all of you in supporting the community education and supporting the treatment options in the jail, the diversion program in the DA's office, the drug court. It's been the most amazing thing, and my career is not going to last all that much longer, so I don't know if I'll ever get this feeling again. But I do want to thank you all. We've got a lot of challenges in the future. I think prescription medications, sort of an unseen epidemic. They're harder to track. They're easier to hide. I think there's a lot of prescription medication abuse. Some states are going to a prescription tracking program in order to track them, but we see huge quantities of pills. We're talking 10,000 pills, so forth, being traded for various drugs. We're seeing cocaine again. When methamphetamine came in, we saw no cocaine almost overnight. We are now seeing cocaine again. Now, I don't want you to take this wrong, but from my point of view, that's a positive. If you got to have something, if you got to have one of the two, I'll take the cocaine, because we didn't see the levels of addiction. We didn't see the problems with the increased domestics, the violence, the paranoia, the things that we see with methamphetamine. I could, and I do, as they will attest, I could talk probably the entire evening about this, but I do want to thank you all, and it has made a tremendous difference in the community, and I think this truly was government working for the people. The challenges of the future have to do with how do we pay, effectively pay to reduce drug abuse, reduce recidivism. There are a number of alternatives out there. Drug court is one of them that we're certainly exploring here. To me, really, that's what it has to come down to, how we spend our money. And right now, corrections is taking a lot of money from the state, and they estimate that 83% of the people that are incarcerated in our prisons have a drug addiction problem. We're going to have to address that one way or the other, or they're going to be back and our costs are going to keep going up. So again, thank you, and I'll try not to talk anymore. Thanks.
Thank you.
On a personal note, I'd like to extend my thanks to Denise Gunderson, one of our supervisors. I attended some of the early meetings in the early formation of the movement to the drug court, but Denise took up that load, and as you know, in some contexts, if nobody does minutes, it can be as though there never was a meeting and there'd be no follow-up. And Denise personally did minutes for many of the meetings, and deserves the gratitude of all of us, I think. Thank you, Denise. With that, I would propose to return to the agenda as it's printed and basically follow that order this evening. So in that case, you're next, Mr. Whiting.
Good evening, everybody. It's always nice to follow good news and more good news. There's going to be a couple new faces around here I'd like to announce. First, two old faces that are going to be in new positions. I think maybe I may have my date wrong on this, but Casey Swetlick is now the county's Emergency Communications Director, and I understand John Schultz will be the new Chief Deputy in the Sheriff's Department. We've hired Mr. Art Tobin from Hudson to be the new Building Services Director. He's been with the City of Minneapolis the last 17 years. He's from Hudson, very involved in the community. We're looking forward to having him start. And I'd like to introduce Tammy Funk. She's standing in the back there. She's the new Human Resources Administrator. She's from Hudson. She's worked for Ramsey County for the last 8 or 9 years in one of their departments over there in personnel, and she started just yesterday. So I'm glad to have her aboard, and I think a lot of other people will be as well. So thank you, Tammy. Couple notes. I'll try to keep this short so you can get on with your evening. You'll note in the Finance Committee minutes we had a little bit of a discussion about an IRS audit that took place last month. It's going to require us to look at a few of our contract-related positions. We'll stay in touch with you on that if we have to change some of those agreements to be a little bit more in compliant with the IRS ruling. It isn't that the county necessarily did anything wrong. We had been given some advice, and I'll let everybody decide for themselves who they would prefer to listen to, the IRS or their auditor. But we'll make some changes and deal with that accordingly. The budget discussion before the Finance Committee a week and a half ago was productive. I did provide the Finance Committee with a list of the capital improvement items that I had been given. I've received some changes since then. I have not been able to get that out of my computer for the county board, so forgive me on that. When I can do that, I'll let you know, but for you on your committees, you've probably been seeing those from your department heads. With July coming up and the budget soon to follow, we'll be getting into contract negotiations with the 4 AFSCME groups. We've been reviewing our health insurance with a leadership group of the 5 represented groups plus some of the non-represented people, and we'll continue to work on that. And then lastly, late today, I received word, this is maybe not of great interest to the county board, but it's fairly significant for those of us who have dealt with WMIC. Our insurance company, they have had in the last 6 weeks, the second time being today, 2 new counties join the mutual, and that is actually very positive news for them because those have been competitive situations with the main competitor of WMIC. Both Rock and Woolworth counties are good counties, and they're coming with good professional staff, and that's going to help that organization. And St. Croix County is a member, so that's my good news. Any questions? Okay,
thank you, Mr. Whiting. On the consent agenda, we have minutes of the last meeting. Note that we have scheduled a meeting for July. There was discussion at our last goal-setting session that it would be desirable to have meetings each month, and after discussion in the administration committee, a decision was made to try that on a test basis. That is not our regular week of the month because of the the finance committee meeting was already scheduled, and in order to get sufficient space between the finance committee meeting and the county board meeting in case there's something coming from that source, therefore the meeting night has been picked as July 24th, and that would be an evening meeting right here. And then we've, Ms. Spear.
Is there any possibility we can have that as a day meeting instead of a night meeting? I'm running into some
yeah. That would conflict with planning and zoning's regular second meeting of the month. Is there, let's see, Wally, is there, would you want to reschedule your meeting? Would that matter to your constituents, your members, et cetera? It's a Tuesday. Well, let's not do it in quite such an ad hoc fashion. We'll study the matter. If it's not going to be July 24th, we'll let you know as soon as possible, and no later than the end of this week. You'll hear from either Cindy or me, or both of us. Is that what you were going to suggest, Mr. Standifer?
No, I was just going to say that those of us that have real jobs, day meetings are real difficult.
You have lots of conflicts, I suppose, huh? All right, well, we'll factor that all into the analysis and get back to you on that. And then on the consent agenda, we have 3 rezonings, as you see, and we had a mailing on that. Hello? We do not have a mileage and per diem report. The finance department didn't finish with it, so next month we'll have 2 of those. That having been said, does anybody want to offer a motion on the consent agenda or separate something out? Ms. Lucky, you want to pull off the minutes?
I'd like to pull the rezonings out.
Okay. Anybody want to make a motion on the other items? Ms. Wentz, Mr. Mills for the second. Oh.
Pull one item, I think we pulled number 11.
On our general agenda, there will be no action for number 11 tonight.
Roger on that.
All right. When we get to number 11, expect silence. Good. All right. We have a motion on the consent agenda except for rezonings. So it's just a minute. It was seconded by Mortensen because Mr. Mills wanted to talk about number 11. All right, so we're approving the minutes of the previous session and the date of the next meeting being July 24th. Whether it's day or night, you'll be informed. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Okay, rezonings. Ms. Lucky.
I just had a question. The sheet that was mailed out to us stated that the Daniel and Amy Haas rezoning was from ag res to industrial, but I note that the agenda tonight says it's ag 2 to ag residential. So I wondered which one is correct. And also, if it is industrial, I would like to hear a brief explanation.
If I state my name or anything?
Is it supposed to be industrial or is it?
It's supposed to be industrial. It's from ag res to industrial. That's the way the ordinance amendment read that was signed by all the committee members.
And what is the rationale behind it then? Something about its location or what causes it to be appropriate for industrial?
I'll take. You take?
I can answer the question. Yeah. This property lies just south of the village of Roberts, and to make a real long story short, the initial staff report only could recommend to commercial zoning because based on the St. Croix County Development Management Plan, industrial was not. The village of Roberts and the town of Warren recently passed an amendment and included a map that included the Hayes property and a bunch of surrounding areas all around that to be, large portions of it to be industrial and other portions of that area to be a mixed use of commercial and industrial. And so this all fits in, excuse me, with the town plan and with the village plan, their joint comprehensive plan. Yep.
South of Roberts, there were 2 pieces of property. There was the stuff on 94, the 3-putt property, and then there was some property that County Concrete bought that is a part of they're being allowed to rezone some property that they already built on that they weren't supposed to build on. They again agreed to keep in conservancy. Is this that property that now will turn out to be industrial? That that's the one where they had to send the vice president over because of a problem?
No.
Okay.
Yep. The county concrete properties are down here, and you can see the Hayes property in this cross-hatched area. I know it's really hard to see from way back there, but this is the stuff that all came through with a joint comprehensive plan to be rezoned. This being all industrial, and the cross-hatched to be a mix of industrial and commercial uses. Yep.
Yes, Mr. Habiger.
If I may, this is all happening as a result of the relocation for State Trunk Highway 65. And so the village and the township have worked together to develop a comprehensive plan for that area, which we think is a marvelous development to have a village and a township working together like that. Thank you.
And I take it that one of the primary factors on industrial, according to our plan, is that there be the capability for sewer service, and this is in an area that can have sewer service, I take it. Did I see another hand? Mr. Kruger, it's covered?
He stole the thunder.
Okay. All right, you take it up with him then. Any other questions? Then let's get a motion in front of us to approve these rezonings. Mr. Troyer, you're moving to approve all three of these rezonings? Correct. Second by Mr. Strumpke. Any other discussion? Thank you, Kevin. All in favor should now vote aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And it passes unanimously. We have no appointments to announce tonight. Let's turn then to old and new business number 2, the amendments that pertain to the sign regulations. You have an ordinance amendment to propose, Mr. Hobhager?
Mr. Chairman, I'll so move, and we have staff available. Ellen Denzer will prepare a report to the board on that.
Very good. Is there a second? Mr. Ritz seconds it. Presentation by St. Croix County Planner, Ellen Denzer, Senior Planner.
I get one question.
Mr. Strumpke.
I've got 2 of these before me. One has no date that I can quick find. The other one shows revised 6/15/07.
Could you cover that, Ellen, please?
Thank you. I wanted to point that out first thing. Just before the meeting started, I handed out a document that was stapled together, and there was a typo in the cover ordinance. The number 17.09, section 17.09, was inadvertently left off, so that has been added to the cover page. And on the inside, there are 3 small changes. I handed that out to be added, to be shown. In the text of the ordinance that you were mailed with your mailings last week, the changes were made based on public hearing comment to change the heights of signs in residential areas. But unfortunately, we were in a hurry to get that out, and we didn't get those changes from the text also into these 2 charts. So this chart, front and back, has 3 small changes that I will go through. Can you see the chart, or this one? Anything else you have related to amendments to the sign regulations is superseded by this handout. Okay? Make sense? Thank you. Okay. Hopefully I can use this correctly. Good evening. My name is Ellen Denzer. As Buck mentioned, I am the Senior Planner in the Planning and Zoning Department, and I will be presenting a short overview of the proposed amendment changes to the St. Croix County zoning ordinance. Okay. No, that's the one, wrong one. This one. There. No, I have to just get used to it. Never used it before, so. Okay. First of all, the authority to adopt this amendment, it comes from Wisconsin Statutes 59.69, Planning and Zoning Authority. We have the authority to regulate land uses, specifically signage. This will be a section 17.65 in the zoning ordinance. It will be applicable in all towns that have county zoning. It is not applicable in villages and cities, and it's not applicable in the 3 towns in the county that are not under county zoning, the town of Hudson, town of Katy, and town of Forest. As you all might recall, about 6 months ago in January, or actually in December, effective January 1, the county board adopted a moratorium on signs, permanent new signs in the county. They did allow temporary signs in the meantime. That moratorium will expire at the end of this month, and we were charged, the Planning and Zoning Committee was charged with creating new sign regulations within that 6-month time frame, which is what we bring to you tonight. Throughout this project, we have wanted to make very sure that there was a lot of public input and public information to make sure that these new regulations responded to the needs in the county. So to that end, some of the things we have done to make sure that we have done that is press release started out the project that went to all county newspapers. We also published a timeline of all the public meeting dates and put that out available to the public. We've direct mailed notices of all meetings and events, like the information meetings, to all the towns, sent it to both clerks and chairmen, the sign industry, and any interested parties. And there was about 30 of those we identified throughout the project. We also attended the Towns Association meeting and provided them with an update and copies of anything at that point in time, which was mostly the timeline. We posted all information throughout this project on the internet, the county's website, and we've held 2 public information meetings and a public hearing and comment periods for both during this project. The first public information meeting was in February. What we did is we asked what is the interest of the public on signs, what do they want to see, what kind of input did they have on what the project should encompass. Most of the things we heard were that people do not want to see lighted electronic motion type signage. They do not want to see billboards, large off-premise signs. They want to identify directional signage for those businesses in the county and support those businesses with good commercial signage and an appropriate size and locations. They wanted sign size, numbers, and heights to be kept to the minimum necessary and to respect other zoning districts and other uses that would be near signage. And they also emphasize the respect for free speech and for the ability to use signs for more than just commercial uses, messages. So using that information, we began the draft and revisions to what was our existing sign regulations. Make sure I'm keeping up there. In April, we held a second public information where we took out our first draft of the sign regulations. Comments that we heard at that time were increase the signage for agricultural signs. Basically, that was recognition that when you're on, a lot of our rural areas have subdivisions, that kind of thing, but we also have areas that are still strong farming communities, and people travel a little faster on those old town roads. They slow down in the subdivisions, but signs need to be a little larger. There was also support for directional signage for the concepts we came up with for businesses, and we had town support for the ordinance amendments as written at that time. Then we went on to our public hearing. That was held this past May. There was about 25 people in attendance, maybe a few more. We got about 15 comments, and we did have a week-long comment period after the hearing night. The comments we heard that evening, among others, were strengthen the prohibition against lighted variable message signs, that it was perhaps not strong enough the way it was written. There was support for the proposed regulations. People commented they liked what we were proposing for size and number, and support for no billboards. There was objections to 20-foot and 12-foot sign heights in residential areas, and some town officials expressed support for the sign regulations that were in attendance that evening. Additional sign comments we heard at that public hearing were the opposite. Allow electronic signage. There was some discussion about some electronic signage can be very attractive, can be useful at special events type things. Then there were other comments that perhaps it's very hard to determine what is an attractive sign and what is not, and that's very judgmental, and they would prefer the county stay out of that kind of determination. So we had a little back and forth from the audience members that evening. There was suggestions about definitions for flag and model home to clarify some things in the ordinance. There was requests for clarification of terminology for the directional signage, and also clarification of some of the types of signs, how we had described them. So the sign regulations, I'll give you an overview of the key components. Basically, one of the first things we did was make sure through legal counsel that all First Amendment issues had been addressed. Signs are used not just to promote commercial messages for commercial activities and for private activities, but also to express opinions. And we wanted to make very sure that our ordinance was content neutral, that we were only regulating time, place, and manner of signs, not what the sign message is. So that our whole ordinance was extensively reviewed, and there were numerous changes to try to address that. One of the things that was added to the ordinance in order to address that is that non-commercial messages, messages that do not have a commercial content, can replace any commercial message sign that's allowed or permitted in the ordinance. This also, there was a segment in there talking about how any message that is a non-commercial message, whether it's talking about the war, talking about the president, a message of support for some particular cause, anything like that, regardless, that message is considered on-premise. So there'd be no issues as to whether it was an on-premise or off-premise sign. Other things, we wanted to make sure we address the need for signage for safety and for getting people aware that getting things done that needed to be done. So certain signs were exempted, traffic, government type signs, flags, incidental signs. The incidental refers to signs that you would not be able to read off the lot. You would need them to things like handicap parking, no parking zone, that kind of thing. Small crop or pesticide type signs that are necessary to warn people, and that kind of thing. We also did a number of things to bring our sign regulations into conformance with state law. The first and most important was election campaign sign regulations. They were updated to be exactly the same as what's allowed under our state regulations. We did try, as we went through this, to keep some of the regulations the same so there'd be less confusion, and there was a strong attempt to make sure that signs, that whatever we'd been regulating, such as the separation from right-of-way, that kind of thing, would be consistent, so we wouldn't have non-conforming signs. Other sign regulations that we created to be more definitive and help people understand what was allowed, which was what was lacking a great deal in our existing ordinance, was standards for placement, dimensions, illumination, construction, maintenance, and safety. Those were all developed and reviewed extensively and put into place. Again, we updated the sign regulations to reflect state law. Non-conforming sign regulations have been changed extensively. State law has also changed recently on that. We changed the permitting process. When a sign is required to have a permit, and not all signs are required to have permits, we changed it from a special exception permit that would go before the Board of Adjustment to a land use permit. This should reduce the cost for the public extensively from about $1,000 down to about $300. And a great many definitions were developed, about 32 of them. But definitions are a key element to making sure that when we're regulating signs, that we're regulating them correctly. Other things we did in the sign regulations is we moved them all to one location for convenience of the public to find them. We had sign regulations in the overlay districts, riverway, shoreland, floodplain, adult entertainment. We had them in the general standards, home occupation. They were all over, and we gathered them all up and we moved them. And you'll see as you've gone through your the actual amendments that a great many other sections they're shifted and redirecting people to find those. We tried to address the signage needs by both the zoning district and by property use. As you all are aware, our ag residential zoning district has a wide variety of uses in it, from large farms to small residential developments, subdivisions. And that can create conflicts in what we were trying to create for regulations. So the regulations are twofold. They address it by zoning district and by the types of uses, residential uses, commercial uses, industrial uses, and other types of uses. We also tried to develop standards for both permanent and temporary signage so that we were addressing, again, not what the content was, but more how it was put up and why and how long. And we tried to make the ordinance more usable and user-friendly by putting most of the information in tables. This is an example of one of the tables, and I know it's very hard to read, but that change that I just referred you to has that, and you can follow along. Both of the tables I'll show you are on this, so you can follow along. First of all, as I said, some of the changes we made, we addressed almost every public hearing comment we had. One of those was about the height of signs in residential areas. I shouldn't say one, there were a couple of comments about that, extensive ones, saying that people did not feel that in residential areas sign heights should go up as high as 20 feet. And the committee agreed, and so we made those changes for signage to go down to, there are no residential signage that goes as high as 20 feet. There are a couple that go as high as 12 feet. We tried to recognize that there are also things like churches and schools in residential areas that may need higher signage. So there's a combination of standards there. And that's why we made those changes. They were probably the most carefully constructed. Got a little busy with trying to get this out the door, and again, I apologize, but that is the change that you'll see. On-premise non-residential, instead of 20, on the second line down, it says 6-12. Whoops. I went the wrong way. There we go. There we go. It says 6-12. In your copy, it's underlined, and it did say 20. And down here, on off-premise directional, it said just 12 feet, and now we added 6 feet, and that'll be the height limit just for residential areas, not for the rest of the areas of the county. So just before we go off this chart, just to summarize a little bit, these are the types of signs that were developed. We tried to keep the number fairly short. There are 10 permanent type. Most of them are on-premise. Most of them address not so much what you're putting the sign up for, but where you're putting it up, whether it's a residential area, a commercial area, industrial, on a commercial or industrial building or agricultural building, agricultural signage, that kind of thing. We also tried to develop, as I mentioned, the directional signage, and that we felt was very important to address the needs of the county. There was a great deal of discussion about the types of signs that we see more and more now from the state of Wisconsin DOT along major highways. Those blue and white signs with some with the logos and some without, and that those are very attractive, very uniform. Travelers are beginning to look for them, find them very useful, and that they are more user-friendly than some of the old-fashioned, big billboards, that kind of thing. And so we wanted to try to utilize that concept. So we had some discussions with Wisconsin DOT, found out what they were doing and what their regulations were, found out that they did not want us to copy their activities, but that we could certainly fill in the gap. And that's what our intention was. In areas where the DOT would deny a sign of a directional type nature like that, we wanted the county to be able to offer that kind of signage. So that's what this is intended to do, is offer that directional signage. Wayfinding is a very important aspect for the public to find businesses and places, including homes and that kind of thing. And you'll see, probably don't have that in front of you, but in the ordinance we provided examples of what that could be like. On page 16, there's these interesting little examples of wayfinding signs. And we tried to illustrate the variety by showing commercial type uses and residential, cabins, beach houses, people's places for hunting shacks, that kind of thing. Should be on page 17.65-16. Anyway, so I just wanted to mention that as a new and fairly important element of this sign regulation is trying to fill the gap and provide that kind of signage throughout the county. I do want to mention too that this, you'll see if you look through this list of all the permanent signs, that there are no billboards. Off-premise, large signs that are the billboard concept were not supported by the public. In fact, it was generally said that we want to support our local businesses, but we don't see any reason to support national corporations or companies that want to have signage in St. Croix County. That was pretty strongly communicated to the committee during all the information meetings. Next, there we go. Temporary signs. We all need temporary signs for a wide variety of uses, and so we developed these temporary signs. These do not need a permit for the most part to be put up. In fact, I think for any of them. What we wanted to do, and I will mention that these are on the back of this page, And there was one change to height, I should mention that first, right here, for on-premise special event. In residential areas, it would be 12 foot, not just 20 foot for everything. Anyway, we need signs whether they're remodeling our home, selling our home, whether you're needing help for someone to mow your lawn, whether you are looking for a temporary sign for a grand opening for a car dealership. All those types of things all need to be addressed. And for the most part, we tried to, again, write broadly stated signs that would not regulate by content, but would regulate by purpose, generally, and location. So on a construction site, on a property where a home might be for sale, on a property where you might have an event of some kind. And again, you need directional signs to get you to those temporary things, whether it's a grand opening, graduation party, something like that. So the sign standards are to address those kinds of temporary events, and that's where these standards came from and what they try to accomplish. And again, like I said, they are, for the most part, you do not need a permit. They're allowed without a permit, and they should be able to go forward fairly quickly for the public. And there we go. And that's all I have. There are more standards in here, but those are the key changes to the sign regulations. Are there any questions? Yes.
Address 1765-4, which would be page 4.
Yep.
Under item 4, number 7. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we need to have in our ordinance a sign this big being directed. This is 36 square inches, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what in the world are you going to write on a sign like this that's going to affect or not affect anybody?
What we were trying to do there is make sure that we were not regulating those signs, that they're under signs exempt from regulation. And actually, there are tons of those kind of signs put up every day. They are pesticide signs.
Sure.
And that kind of thing. And we don't want to have anything to do with them. That's why they're under signs exempt from regulation.
I totally understand that. But
Okay.
That's put on, that it would include then other signs below this size.
Uh-huh.
So what I'm saying is that a sheet of paper would be exempt. An 8.5 by 11 piece of paper would be exempt. It can only be 36 square inches.
Okay.
If I could repeat your statement for the microphone. You're pointing out that subsection 7 says a sign that is 36 inches or less is exempt from any regulation. And you're pointing out what is the size of 36 square inches.
Yes.
It's
That's what I'm doing. I would certainly think that they should be exempt.
I'll have to repeat your comment.
They should be exempt, and so maybe should something even bigger than that, because you know what a pesticide sign is. Somebody comes in and puts it on your lawn and sticks it on this little stake, and it's there.
Right.
But to have regulations that result in worrying about this kind of stuff, to me, is ridiculous.
Certainly, Mr. Awesome.
Ms. Denzer, could you put back up that nice chart that you did?
Sure. First one or the second one?
Well, the one that says permanent sign standards.
Yep. Okay.
You have a size here listing the new sizes permitted. Could you briefly tell us the previous sizes permitted, that I might just write it down so we can see the difference?
I'll go through them. On-premise residential, that sign there was previously no sign of that type permitted. On-premise non-residential, I don't believe we had a specific sign like that permitted, identified. Commercial, I can't remember. Does anyone remember from the planning and zoning staff what the previous size was?
There were actually no sizes stipulated for on-premise signs. That was part of the problem. So they had to go, any requests for those types of signs had to go before the board.
Okay. So that would take care of the next.
All of them.
Well, almost all of them, yeah. Yes.
As a follow-up to that, for instance, on-premise commercial let's just take Hudson Hospital. Would that be on-premise commercial? Would that fall under that?
Yes.
Their signage. So they would be allowed, if they were going to build today, 120 feet of signage, which is roughly 10 by 12 of signage.
Uh-huh.
Is that my understanding?
Right.
And for instance, how big are they currently with Hudson Hospital?
I don't know. That's in the city.
Okay.
So this regulation would not affect them.
So this is
And I'll just point out a couple things. First of all, that would only be their standalone sign in front of their building. In addition, they could have wall signage up to 320 square feet on their building. And then they could also have, I gotta remember all of them. They could also have the directional signage, like telling people enter and parking or emergency, that kind of thing. Probably the emergency sign would be the on-premise directional kind of thing.
Okay.
So.
I understand.
Okay.
So this sign ordinance then only applies to the countryside or unincorporated areas, and it doesn't apply to any of the cities of the county?
No, it does not apply to the cities, it does not apply to the villages, it does not apply in the towns of Hudson, which has its own zoning, or the towns of Katy, or the towns of Forest.
Okay. And so the real change is to set a size where there was none before on the commercial and industrial. Is that a fair summary of what is happening here?
That's a very small part of the ordinance, but yes, that's a big change. That would be one of the biggest changes, yeah.
Okay. And then, let me just see if I understand. You said there are absolutely no billboards anywhere allowed in an unincorporated area?
No new billboards. All existing billboards would continue to, especially under state law, which there's no amortization anymore of billboards or anything like that.
Okay. And can those existing billboards be replaced with electronic signage billboards?
No.
I just wanted to understand what we were voting on. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chuck.
The monument, that plays the rock, the engraved rock?
No, it does not have to be the engraved rock. What monument means is that the base of the sign has to be on the ground versus on a pole. There has to be a base to the sign. It does not have to be rock or anything like that.
Those would have to be outside the right-of-way, properly.
Yes, the way that is a carry forward from our existing ordinance. All signs right now in St. Croix County have to be 10 feet from the right-of-way. One change we did make in this ordinance is that these directional signs that we wanted to fill in with the state DOT, for areas that were denied a state DOT sign, those we did not say had to be 10 feet from the right-of-way. They simply had to be outside the right-of-way. That was a relaxation of that standard.
And I can talk about this later, with our new American Legion post, if we have a decorative type of thing, that has to be outside, 10 feet outside the right-of-way, rock, so to speak.
It's in the city, so it wouldn't apply, but generally, yes, that's, okay. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'd like to know if the content can be changed on what I will call grandfathered billboard signs. And one other question, on the signs that you're going to use for directional, say to cabins or gas stations or motels or things, will you do what the state does and sell people that space, or will it just be a blank, go to a gas station?
Okay, your first question, can you change the content of your billboard? Absolutely. We are not regulating the messages on the sign, other than things like manner, which means the electronic. Okay? We're not prohibiting all lighted signs either. You can still have them lighted. You just can't have the changing, flashing lighted signs. Okay? Secondly, your question, are we selling it? No. The county isn't getting in the business of selling signs. That was not the intent. We did find out as part of researching what DOT does that they do rent those signs, and they charge an initial fee, quite a generous initial fee, and an annual rent. And there was some discussion, interestingly enough, if the highway department would ever be interested in doing something like that. But we very quickly dropped that idea as that would be their business. See if they ever wanted to get into something like that. That we're not doing anything like that.
So if you want to find a gas station, then that sign that you will allow will just say gas station?
No, it should say the name of your gas station. It should say Ellen's Gas Station, 1 mile that way, and have the arrow and that kind of thing. Similar to what the state has on their DOT signs.
So it's first come, first served, or will you have 3 gas station arrows?
You're going to have 3 gas station arrows or whatever we did encourage co-locating them the way the state does, where you have multiple signs on one post to reduce the proliferation of signs in the county. That was encouraged but not required. And it's kind of encouraged also by allowing a little more generous signage at certain intersections, and recognizing that that's the most popular place probably to have it is an intersection that gets you to a certain location. The junction of E and V is a more popular place than a mile, 2 miles back. So that'll be an encouragement to co-locate your signs at that corner to get people to turn, if that's what you need them to do.
I'm sorry I'm not up to date. I just need to ask though.
That's all right.
Is there a fee at all for any business to be on those directional signs?
The only
Who's
fee.
going to pay for the sign?
The owner. Okay. The owner would pay for the sign, and they would come in and get a permit from St. Croix County, the $300 land use permit. That's what it is at this time. There would be, then after that, negotiating with another person. That person could recoup their cost or add it. We'd only get a permit once. Ron?
The ordinance does simplify the process, though, of getting signage versus what we had previously.
It extensively simplifies it. Most of the signs previously had to go through the Board of Adjustment for a public hearing, much greater cost, a much longer time frame, and now they will be able to do in fact, all of them, if a permit is required, it will be a land use permit, which you come in and probably get in a month or less.
Are you ready to vote? All in favor should now vote aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Mr. Hobhager, you have another one, I believe.
Oh, yeah, real lucky.
Yeah, well, pay off for all your committee's work. Are you moving the mining ordinance then?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Troyer, you're seconding that? How do you wish to present it to the board, Mr. Hobhager?
We have Jenny Shilcox will be doing a presentation for us, and there's other staff in the back there that's also available as well. Thank you.
If any other staff people are expecting to speak, you might want to save us all time by taking the second microphone before your time comes. You all know Jennifer Shilcox? Well, here she is.
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jenny Shilcox. I'm a land use specialist with the Planning and Zoning Department. I currently administer the St. Croix County non-metallic mining ordinance, so I will be presenting the proposed amendments. Okay. This is my first time using this contraption too. There we go. I'll start out with the county's authority for regulating non-metallic mining operations and reclamation. That authority is under Wisconsin statutes, sections 5969 and 295.13, which provides counties with regulatory authority to regulate operations through zoning and reclamation of non-metallic mining land uses. And St. Croix County has had a non-metallic mining ordinance in place since 1989. Before the enactment of Wisconsin State Administrative Code Chapter NR 135, which was recently updated and which triggered us amending our ordinance. We had to come into compliance with the requirements of Chapter NR 135, and it gave us an opportunity to look at our existing ordinance and see where there were some opportunities for strengthening language or addressing issues and other problem areas or inconsistencies. right, we did conduct extensive public outreach. We updated this ordinance on the same time frame and same process that we followed for the sign regulations. So we sent press releases to all county newspapers. We published a timeline of all public meeting dates and outlining our process. We sent that along with notices and direct mailings to all of the towns, to all mine operators, mine property owners, and excavators. It was over 40 individuals that we sent direct notices and letters to throughout the process. We also sent notices to all county newspapers. We posted all of our information on the county website as updates were made so that there was always current information available to anyone who wanted to review the changes that we were making. We held 2 public information meetings that each had comment periods, and we had 1 public hearing that also had a comment period. And I will try to summarize the information and feedback that we received in those information meetings and hearings. Okay, our first public information meeting was in February, and that was our kickoff. Really, we weren't suggesting any changes at that time. We really wanted to get feedback on the changes required by NR 135, as well as feedback on some of the provisions that we already had in our ordinance, those being the 5-year special exception permit renewal requirement. We wanted to get feedback on what operators and property owners felt about renewing every 5 years. Should it be extended? Should it be eliminated? Should it be shortened? We also wanted to gauge interest in requiring stormwater management standards, since we did not have any of those standards in the ordinance and felt that might be an area where we were lacking. And we also were concerned about groundwater, protecting groundwater, and asked for feedback on potentially prohibiting mining into groundwater, specifically quarrying into groundwater, and dewatering. We received quite a bit of feedback at that hearing and in written comments afterwards, or I'm sorry, at that meeting and in comments afterwards. We actually got comments that we did not bring up, feedback on items that we didn't bring up. One was clarification of what mining activities were exempt, what mining activities were permitted in the Ag District. In response to the 5-year special exception permit renewal, there was support for potentially extending or eliminating that renewal time frame with proper tracking. But we felt that we didn't have our reporting quite refined yet and weren't able to effectively track, so we weren't ready to make that change. We made that decision. We also heard back from many people saying stormwater issues were already adequately being addressed by the DNR through Chapter NR 216 permits and WPDS discharge permits, so they weren't necessary, and we agreed with that, so that change was not pursued any further. We received quite a bit of feedback on the groundwater issue, and that was really the hot topic throughout this entire updating process. We really didn't receive any feedback on the changes required by NR 135, forgot to mention that, so we didn't, the changes that were required are in the draft that's before you tonight, and I will summarize those a little bit later. But as for groundwater, we got a lot of feedback that we should protect groundwater, specifically maintain groundwater elevations, minimize turbidity in people's wells or in surface waters, reduce any thermal impacts from mining, and protect surface and groundwater flow connections. So we took that information and we put together our first draft, which we presented at another public information meeting in April. What we were proposing for groundwater at that time was to allow mining into groundwater with a hydrogeologic report, prohibiting dewatering as part of a mining operation, and requiring wash ponds to have 5 feet of separation to groundwater. The feedback that we got on those proposed amendments was pretty diverse. Again, a lot of people saying protect groundwater, still very concerned about it. They wanted us to provide standards for what should be included in a hydrogeologic report if one is required. We got some feedback from scientists and some members of the industry suggesting that modeling, groundwater modeling, be incorporated as part of the hydrogeologic report. We also got feedback from other industry members saying modeling would be costly and unreliable, especially on a small scale. We also heard from the industry saying not to prohibit dewatering, that blasting and quarrying was inefficient and very costly without it, and not to require the 5 feet of separation to wash ponds. So we went back to the drawing board. We took all of that information very seriously. We spent a lot of time and put a lot of effort into researching what standards should be incorporated into the ordinance. So what we came up with and what was presented at our May public hearing were standards for hydrogeologic reports. And that all those standards that we were suggesting as amendments at the hearing were consistent with the feedback that we had gotten from members of the mining industry and scientists. We required modeling as part of that report. There were some components of the hydrogeologic report that called for predicting what could happen, what potential impacts there might be on groundwater, and that's all associated with modeling. We allowed dewatering and still required wash ponds to have 5 feet of separation. So the ordinance language regarding groundwater evolved throughout this process, and we were just constantly trying to refine it and react to the feedback that we got. So we got some more comments, quite a few comments at the public hearing and afterwards. Very numerous comments from citizens and elected officials from towns and county officials who were still just directly opposed to mining into groundwater. Some officials did say that they were opposed, but if mining were allowed, they strongly supported a hydrogeologic report. We heard from many scientists, including scientists that were here earlier tonight giving presentations on groundwater and hydrogeology, as well as members of the mining industry that were supportive of hydrogeologic reports and made recommendations to strengthen and clarify the standards that we had listed for the report, require modeling only in certain specific circumstances that might trigger modeling, but they strongly felt that it shouldn't be required every time a hydrogeologic report was required for mining into groundwater. And then requiring monitoring and remediation if any problems occurred as a result of mining into groundwater. And that brings us to the changes tonight that are before you tonight. Just going to briefly recap the changes that were required by NR 135. Those were synchronized annual report and fee deadlines. Previously, we had different deadlines for annual reports and annual fees that are required by the DNR and by the county for reclamation purposes. So it was very confusing, and now it has been streamlined. Updated reclamation standards with respect to topsoil management, final slopes, high walls, and professional hydrogeologic analysis. This really has to do with ensuring that all of these items are consistent with the proposed post-mining land use. And they also clarified administrative procedures for noticing, for appeals, and processing permits. As far as general amendments that responded to some of the concerns raised at the very first information meeting, we changed the exemption. Previously, non-metallic mining operations under 1 acre were exempt. They were listed under exemptions, but then in another section of the ordinance it said any non-metallic mining activities disturbing 10,000 cubic yards or involving 10,000 cubic yards of material or less required a land use permit. So there was an inconsistency there, so we cleared that up. In the Ag District, non-metallic mining that was under 10,000 cubic yards or borrow sites required a special exception permit when in other districts they required land use permits. There was concern about that. You know, why should operations in Ag districts that are being done to increase productivity on ag properties have to go through the special exception process. So we made sure that the permitting requirements were consistent with the other districts in the county. But just I want to clarify that any mining in the ag district still has to be tied to ag purposes. Petroleum products stored must be stored according to state and federal standards. That is a requirement that our Board of Adjustment has put as a condition on many recent non-metallic mining permits. So we decided, since they were being so consistent with that, it should go into the ordinance. We allowed for different types of aerial photos to be submitted as part of the application, not just limited to NRCS photos, which had previously been listed. And then we require that all water features and wells within 1,200 feet of the non-metallic mining site be shown on the site map. We previously had not required that. So that pretty much summarizes just the miscellaneous general concerns with the non-metallic mining that were addressed in this update. Which brings us to groundwater. What we have finally settled on, which is before you tonight, if you want to follow along in your ordinance, this is on the groundwater protection standards are on pages 6 through 7. Under section 14.2, I believe it's A8. Number C now says, wash ponds and settling ponds shall have 5 feet of separation to bedrock. Previously, the separation was to groundwater. The difference is that the primary concern with wash ponds is that they collect the sediments from the mining operation. They're generally used with quarry operations, not sand and gravel operations. But at any rate, should there be any failure in the pond or any fractures underneath the pond in bedrock, those sediments could drain directly into the aquifer, and any pollutants could also potentially drain into the aquifer. So we are requiring a 5-foot separation to bedrock, which would provide filtration of any sediments and pollutants. It's also consistent with state standards for stormwater ponds, animal waste storage facilities, and pouts.
Jenny?
Yes.
I might have heard it wrong. You stated there at the summation of the 5-foot issue that it was 5-foot separation from bedrock. Did you mean groundwater?
No, that's the change that was made. It previously was to groundwater, now it is to bedrock. So, for example, in a sand and gravel operation, or if you have a wash pond or some other settling pond or a pond for another purpose that is in groundwater, there would be no separation distance.
And what is bedrock? What is it meant by?
It would be the limestone, the Prairie du Chien formation, essentially. That answer your question? If other members of the staff, particularly Land and Water Committee, have anything to add on that, please feel free to do so. All right. Then for the hydrogeologic report, we responded to suggestions to clarify, strengthen the standards that we had. We also reorganized everything. The standards really have not changed all that much from the May hearing draft. They've just been reordered and fleshed out a bit more. And what we're really trying to do is anticipate and prevent any problems that might occur from mining operations. And to do that, we felt it was necessary to establish baseline data of existing conditions. So we're requiring basically an inventory of groundwater elevations, known karst features, surface water features, wells, municipal well heads within the vicinity of a proposed mine. We also want to get baseline data on the quality of the water, velocity, flow directions, that type of thing, so that we understand what's presently going on in that area. And then as part of the operation plan, we want data on proposed mining activities into groundwater, any a description of dewatering, any preventative measures to be taken to prevent any problems. as well as the establishment of an ongoing groundwater monitoring program so that we can evaluate what's going on throughout the duration of the operation. And then we're also recommending, or as part of the amendments, guidelines for the Board of Adjustment so that if they feel they don't have enough information necessary or there are certain circumstances that would trigger the need for additional analysis, they could do so. It helps them to determine when additional analysis like groundwater modeling or dye tracing or some other method might be necessary to address any potential problems. Things that might trigger the need for additional analysis might be the presence of an outstanding or exceptional water resource in close vicinity to the proposed mining operation, known contaminated aquifers within the vicinity, known karst features, if dewatering is proposed. So it provides the board with more guidance than they currently have. They currently have, the Board of Adjustment currently has authority to request additional impact studies or environmental information if they deem it's necessary, but there aren't any specific guidelines in place for non-metallic mining operations. So that's what we try to do with these standards. And then finally, we added a provision that mine operators shall be responsible for remediation if any problems occur. Remediation such as replacing wells, cleaning up any potential contamination that would be identified as part of the monitoring process. That summarizes all of the amendments before you. Do you have any questions? Mr. Marzoff?
Thank you. Could you just define what dewatering means and give an example?
Okay. I could do it, but I think that a member from our Land and Water Conservation Department could probably do a better job. So.
Your question is, what is dewatering? Thank you. They actually are mining under the groundwater. Essentially what they're going to be doing is pumping out of that water, and they could do it. They could actually pump that water on, and there's existing site. It could happen, or they could pump it off site. So they're physically pumping it out of that pit or that sump, if you will. Yeah, it's just going to be easier to get the rock out. One clarification, if I can make, and I think Jenny may have misspoke a little bit. When we talked about the 5 foot of separation between bedrock, in most cases, you're going to have those conditions, the 5 foot separation, or wash ponds themselves, more in sand and I believe more in sand and gravel than you are in hard rock quarries. Although they can occur in hard rock quarries, I think more common you'll find them in the sand and gravel facilities.
Mr. Strumke.
You didn't cover it as a change, but I do have some questions on the applicability portion, 14-2, where it's the application of the ordinance. I'm kind of curious. I don't know if it really needs changing. Maybe I don't understand legalese here, and I probably do not. But when you do A here, it talks about that this ordinance is applicable to any non-metallic mining site within St. Croix County that commenced non-metallic mining operations after April 11th, 1989. Are we saying that this ordinance, as it's now written, is going to be backdated to anybody before this was done, and they have to now comply with this?
No. What it's saying is that 1989 was when the original non-metallic mining ordinance was enacted. So it's essentially exempting any mining operations that predate our original ordinance.
And I understand that.
Okay.
But it says that this ordinance is applicable. This ordinance has been changed, and I'm supposing we're going to vote on it. And in that paragraph, we've said it's now applicable to all those people back to 1989. There's no grandfather in this at all that says anybody between 1989 and the enactment In fact, when you go to B, which is logical, it says an application for mining operation permit on or after effective date of this ordinance shall comply with this ordinance. That's logical. You go to D, and it says after this ordinance becomes effective, the county shall review the plans, the reclamation plans, all of them out there, and tell them what they need to do to bring it up to this one, I'm assuming, because again, there's no clause in here that exempts them. So unless there's, I'm not seeing it in here, or somebody can explain why it's not needed to be in here, it seems to me there's no grandfathering to any pre-existing approved mining operation. And the way it's worded, they have to come in compliance with this now, and you actually state a portion of it there. I don't know if that's quite appropriate.
Well, I'm going to defer to other staff from our department. I can tell you that when we undertook the amendments to this ordinance, we weren't really repealing and replacing anything, so we were referring to an ordinance that was already in place, and much of the work that was done to bring the existing mines into compliance with the reclamation standards that are in NR 135 has already been done. I mean, that's really a non-issue at this point. As far as any standards that would, you know, make any situation non-conforming presently, those would be addressed at the time that permits are renewed, and we wouldn't.
And then they have to comply with this, correct?
Dave, do you want to add anything?
There were new requirements that were made or enacted in 2004, and that's why there's a distinction in terms of the applicability tied to that particular date.
I understand that, but if you go into the whole applicability portion of it here, it's saying not just those dates, it's saying anything after those dates, and it says that they got to comply with this ordinance. And unless, in my mind, and we've got counsel sitting up here, but if you say that and you leave that in there and then you change it, then when permits came before the county and were granted, and you change it and you leave that in there, it's my understanding they now got to comply with this unless you say it's okay. They don't, because they've already, it's pre-existing. You know, the grandfather clause issue.
I think when the ordinance was amended again in 2004, and there were changed permitting requirements, there was a staggering of these dates in terms of permits that were in effect after 1989 up until the changes in 2004, and permits that were taken out after 2004.
Well, I guess what
I think I might have found something that better addresses your question. If you turn to page 14-1, section 14.1A3, it refers to the effective date of the last revision, which was February 20th, 2004, replacing the ordinance passed in 1989, and then establishes amendments effective July 1st, 2007. So
I understood that. And,
okay.
But again, it still does not go back. If you go into the paragraphs, it says this ordinance is applicable to any that commenced non-metallic mining operations after April 11th, 1989. Any. And so, and then you're going to do reviews. I mean, I'm just kind of curious why we didn't go back if we were going to rewrite this thing, why we didn't take a look at that. But maybe it's not important. I just need somebody to tell me that if I'm running a mining operation out there right now, that the county is not going to come to me and say, we've reviewed your stuff and you're not in compliance with this new ordinance and you got to change. And as I read it right now, the county could do that. And I don't think that's right.
Well, we did have that discussion, and initially we went through and changed all the dates to from February 20th, 2004 to July 1st, 2007. But then, upon having more discussions about it, we felt that because we weren't doing a comprehensive rewrite of the ordinance, we needed to keep the reference to the 2004 ordinance and then just reference those amendments that would become effective July 1st, 2007. So that would essentially, anything that is passed now, the effective date is July 1st, 2007. And if operations are not in compliance with those standards, they would essentially be grandfathered in.
Doesn't say that.
Greg, did you want to speak?
Grandfathering applies to the situation where a use that was legal before an ordinance is enacted, which makes it illegal, is allowed to continue to operate. We're not telling anybody that operated a mining operation before that they can't operate it anymore. What they're doing is changing the conditions under which they can continue to operate that business, and in my opinion, that's valid, although it could be challenged, and it could go the other way in court. But my opinion is that we're not shutting down anybody. We're not making them a non-conforming use. We're simply changing the conditions under which they can operate, continue to operate that business. The 1989 ordinance contained a provision that required all non-metallic mining operations in the county to come into compliance with that ordinance within 2 years. That was the trade-off between declaring something non-conforming and allowing it to continue as a legal permitted use. And every amendment to the non-metallic mining ordinance since then has just reflected that same approach.
Thank you. Ms. Norton-Baumann?
Yeah, thank you. The one concern I have is on page 14-7, and you put it up on the screen with your overhead. In section E in the center of the page, as a condition of approval, the operator shall accept responsibility for remediation or the permit may be revoked. That seems really broad to me, and who will determine what needs to be remediated?
All of these operations are operating with under special exception permit, which is approved by the Board of Adjustment. So if they are not, if it is found that they have caused a problem and they fail to remediate it, the board could initiate revocation of the special exception permit, and there are procedures outlined in the ordinance for that. They would have to hold another public hearing and generate findings and conclusions to revoke the permit. So it will be the Board of Adjustment.
Thank you. So just for clarification, if I'm a neighbor a mile away from one of these mining operations and my well goes dry, who's going to take care of that?
Initially, you would contact county staff, and that's where we would rely on the baseline data and the information from the monitoring wells to find out what's going on. And we might require additional analysis at that point if they refuse to remediate. Otherwise, it would go to revocation procedures.
Members, do you need more information before voting? Wish to make any statements pro or con? Prefer to vote? All in favor should now vote aye. Aye. And opposed, nay. The chair declares that the motion has passed. Thank you, Ms. Shilcox. Let's see, we've been at it for an hour and a half. Let's see if we can't squeeze in the nursing home report and the Health and Human Services Department report. It's number 4, and Committee and Department report, Health and Human Services. And after that, as an incentive, we'll promise ourselves a break. How's that? Fred Johnson, you are panting at the bit to give us a report or two. And he has a PowerPoint presentation, I understand. Tomorrow night, the Health and Human Services Board has its annual hearing on Health and Human Services types of needs in the county. Is that 7 o'clock, Esther?
Starts at 6 o'clock.
At 6 o'clock, and the location of it is? Well, I was trying to do a filler. Fred's here, and he can cover it.
Yes, it's tomorrow night at 6 p.m. It's in the Health and Human Services building. There will be signs available, but it's back in the back into the building where we rent space to Head Start. There's a bigger room there.
And all of the signs will be under 32 square feet, I
I hope so. First, if I can give a brief update with regard to the nursing home report. The last nursing home subcommittee meeting was held on May 25th. An additional meeting was scheduled for June 20th, tomorrow, but that meeting has been canceled. It is likely that it'll be rescheduled when we get word back from the county's legal counsel in this matter that negotiations are complete. I believe it was anticipated that the June 20th meeting, or maybe the scheduling of it, would move the process along more quickly, but that was not the case. I did have a brief conversation with Brian Pertel today, who's one of the attorneys representing the county, and we both expect, or maybe it's that we both hope, that the upcoming July board meeting more information would be available. Brian did indicate that a transaction of this nature is complex, and it's not unusual that the negotiations have taken the time that they have. One of the things that I would mention briefly in terms of information that I've heard is that there have been some frustrations over the past month or two related to basically not knowing information. You know, what's going on, everything's held in closed session. And while I might not be able to alleviate this frustration at this point in time, I would like to address at least the issue of public input before any final negotiation may come before this county board. When I considered this or talked about it with a few folks, there really were three options, and Chair Malik already addressed one of them, and that is at the open budget hearing for nursing home and Health and Human Services, again scheduled tomorrow, June 20th, 6 p.m. Look for the signs. The other two options may require county board input, and one option was the possibility of public input to the nursing home subcommittee. So there may be an opportunity in one of those meetings to actually schedule time for public input. Another option would be a similar such public input opportunity, but to the full county board. And I guess I would look to this board to maybe address that issue and how the consideration for public input may be addressed in any one of those three options or others.
Ms. Wentz.
Noticing that we have several people in the audience who are employees of the nursing home, it would seem to me that it would be a good thing if this board would allow some input from them at the time the presentation is made to the full county board. I remember back when I first became a member of the board, we had the casino issue that was facing Hudson, and we had busloads of people that were brought in, and they were allowed a certain amount of time to speak to the casino, whether they were for or against it. And I believe this issue is just as important as the casino. As that was to Hudson, this is to the Richmond and outer areas of the county. And I would hope that as a county board, we would want to listen to what these people have to say, so that when the presentation is made to us, if and when that presentation is made, that these people have an opportunity, and we publicize it in such a manner that they will know at what time to appear.
Mr. Strumke?
I would concur. I believe it's one thing to have in closed session meetings and not getting information from the public. I think it should be well noticed, maybe even further out in advance. And I think this board should offer that up to the citizens in the county, to be fair, to come and give their input also.
Fred, will you be summarizing the statements that you get at tomorrow night's meeting so that we will have available that information?
There are always minutes taken at the open hearing, and so those would be summarized and forwarded as all minutes. So we would make a certainly make a point to make sure that that occurs.
We have heard already from some folks, of course, with letters and phone calls and items in the newspapers, and it's not over, of course, so it's appropriate to continue to take information. I take your point, and we'll consider what to do best to make sure that all viewpoints are represented without redundancy, of course. Once it's been, many people have the same point to make, whether they be any of the different viewpoints on this topic. So we'll think about what to do best about that. Mr. Marzoff?
If I may just add a comment to Supervisor Wentz's comments. When I was growing up, many elderly people made sacrifices on my behalf that I was not even aware of and perhaps did not appreciate. As I look through the papers, the River Falls Journal and the Hudson Star Observer, I see little, if any, criticism of the way the county nursing home operates, and I don't hear many complaints about the budget deficit that is incurred because of the nursing home. And I just feel that there comes a time in every one of our lives when it's time to give back, and those who can no longer give and reside in the nursing home depend on, if not have a right to, our support.
Anybody else want to be heard? All right, please proceed with your.
This is the 2006 annual report for Health and Human Services and for the St. Croix County Health Center. I'll start with nursing home, and before I get into any detail, I would like to again remind the board that the quality of care at the nursing home, as reported last month, first part of May, we had a deficiency-free survey with regard to direct care, as well as a deficiency-free survey on engineering. Traditionally, we have a fair amount of admissions and discharges. The facility is used to a large extent with regard to rehabilitation, and that's bared out in these numbers. When people leave the nursing home, there are a variety of reasons for discharge. A little bit higher percentage of those individuals this last year, in 2006, were able to go home as compared to previous years. Our admissions primarily come, again, over the last 4 years, as this chart indicates, from hospitals. One of the things I would note in terms of average daily census, in 2004 it was 70.58. In 2005, it was 69.25, and in 2006, it was 66.25. So the trend has been a downward trend. I don't know if that is going to continue, but one of the informational pieces that we gave to Health and Human Services around nursing home utilization does indicate a decreased trend of use, and here it's indicated with regard to those age 65 and older, as well as those 85 and older. A topic of discussion that has been routine at this board has been the RFP. Again, that was approved for solicitation of proposals by a vote of 28-3. I don't have the date of that board meeting, but requests for proposals actually went out November 20th of 2006 with a response deadline of February 15th of 07. And as has been reported, the RFP committee has selected Christian Community Homes and Services of Hudson as a successful applicant at this point. There was a brief discussion already with regard to revenues, and you can see the breakout of revenues for health and or for the nursing home. The revenues totaled just under $6 million. We have a fund balance at this point of $189,867, basically of unapplied levy. That is after you've applied all of the county appropriations that were budgeted for 2006, and that number is $1.3 million. One of the reasons for the nursing home operational deficit is, on average, it may cost approximately $240 a day for the cost of care, dependent on the number of residents, and Medicaid reimbursement is $137.54 per day. This is a breakout of the expenditures. There should be detail also in a report that's in front of you for all the various services. I won't go into a lot of detail, but they totaled $5.8 million. Moving on to Health and Human Services. We had an opportunity in 2006 to develop and work on strategic planning. As part of that planning, we did develop an agency mission, Quality Health and Human Services for Everyone, by Everyone. The needs in the county, what this says to me, are not needs that are just met by Health and Human Service staff, but we look to each other and our community partners to make sure that there's quality health and human services for everyone, by everyone. We also developed a mission statement. Included in this mission statement for Health and Human Services is the purpose section, which is your first part, increasing community responsibility, safety, and self-sufficiency. The business part, the method or actions through which we intend to accomplish the purpose, develop a coordinated continuum of services dependent on community collaboration. Again, we can't be all things to all people, followed by the value statement of why we do what we do. One of the things I would indicate, not the only reason why we've worked on strategic planning within our department, but one of the reasons that we did is we are experiencing, as everybody knows, a significant population increase. And how are we going to handle the increase in service demand for health and human services in the coming years? From April of 2000 to July of 2006, population increased 26.7% in St. Croix County, a little less than 17,000 residents. So trying to prepare ourselves for the future and how we might meet consumer needs. Out of the strategic planning sessions that we did, there were 5 basic components or categories of work that we intend to accomplish over the next, I believe it's a 5-year plan. First, diversification of funding. We recognize that we want to do a better job maximizing revenue streams that are current with regard to health and human services, and be proactive around pursuing alternative revenue streams, considering grants, a grant writer, a better application or utilization of volunteers, things of that nature. We've also focused in on performance measures as more and more of our reporting requirements are outcome measured versus just how many service units we provided in any particular time frame. Additional considerations with regard to performance measures is we need to develop a long-range plan for health and human services, again, in response in part to our increased population, rapid population growth. Building partnerships, again, focused on internal and external. We can't be all things to all people, but what is it that we can do well, and what can we look to our community partners to assist us with? Training and development, again, looking at local, regional, and maybe national opportunities for training to stay on the cutting edge of opportunities that may exist for Health and Human Services staff. And then communication and marketing. We need to do a better job internally as well as externally on what we do and how we do it, and develop better chains of communication. I am pleased to say that we have tomorrow a kickoff event where staff are going to participate in a review of the strategic plan. They've been given information about it. We are using POP fund revenues to have a lunch for staff, so there's an incentive for them to come as well, but I'm appreciative of the fact that we have over 100 staff that will participate in discussion tomorrow around strategic planning. Some of the specific program areas that we'll get into for Health and Human Services, I'll just do brief overviews. Family and Children Services is one of the components. We deal with child abuse and neglect, juvenile delinquency. Here's the key services that are provided in that particular unit. In some of the charts that follow, you'll see that alternate care admissions in 1996 and 97 were a bit higher than they are currently, and in part that's due to 17-year-olds being handled in the adult court system. There is some discussion that they may move back to juvenile court. I don't know the current status of that discussion or whether it will in fact happen anytime soon, but we are certainly going to pay attention to that because it will have budget implications. As you can see, back in 96 the number of admissions were, and in 97 and maybe even 1998 were higher. Last year we had 259 admissions into alternate care. That translates into 11,558 days that children spent out of their parental home for reasons of abuse or neglect, delinquency, community safety, those types of issues. One of the things with regard to alternate care days that I always need to make a pitch for, and I think I did last year, and I'm going to again this year, is that when we need to have resources for our young people, we like to have them locally, if at all possible. And we typically, for a county our size, we only have, at any given point, approximately 30 foster homes. So if anybody here tonight or anybody in the listening area is interested in becoming a foster parent, the person to contact is John Brettel, and John can be reached at 246-8317, and he'd be happy to talk with you about how you might be able to meet some needs of the youth of our community. We've traditionally looked at reports of abuse and neglect. We had 852 reports. We did full assessments on 449, or approximately 52% of those. I think the question was asked previously why we don't go out on all of them. A couple of main reasons would be multiple referrals on the same incident, or the case may already be open for ongoing services. Those are just two of the reasons that you will see a discrepancy between what cases were actually assessed and what were screened out. This slide just refers to our offenses for kids referred to juvenile intake. There's a listing in the annual report that you have. The offenses range from truancy to burglary. That number has remained fairly consistent, 746 referrals last year. Another service area that we have taken a look at and are developing through a combination of long-term support, family and children's, and our behavioral health unit is developing coordinated family services. We provide a wraparound model. We're able in this unit to do targeted case management as well as SED waiver, severely emotionally disturbed waiver case management. What that boils down to is the opportunity to draw down federal dollars in cases that we haven't been able to draw down federal dollars in the past. It's been all local taxpayer dollars. So we also utilize purchase services in this department, which are in this unit where we're talking about foster care, treatment, foster care, respite, those types of things. just a brief visual on the recoupment that we've been able to get that would have typically been or historically been county levy dollars. In 2006, we continue to see growth in the area of the federal dollar recoupment through case management billing, as well as billing for services in the purchased arena, just a little short of 300,000. Back to 2003, it was approximately 25. So we've seen significant growth in being able to utilize federal dollars where local levy has been utilized in the past. Public health, briefly, chapters 250 to 255 are the governing statutes, and they identify the core services and the core function and the essential services. They're highlighted here on the outside, the core functions: assurance, assessment, and policy development. An example of assessment would be our community needs assessments that's done every 5 years. Policy development, I think everybody's aware of the Surgeon General's report on the harmful effects of secondhand smoke, and there could be policy considerations with regard to that issue. Assurance, we're not a primary, don't take a primary role in immunizations, but we do take a role in making sure that folks are immunized. Inspection and licensing, that would be another role of assurance. Our public health programs are listed here, and there's more detail in the information provided. Briefly, here's some numbers, and there's more numbers in terms of those consumers, residents of St. Croix County that have been recipients of public health services. Onto the behavioral health unit. Again, there's a blend of provided and purchased services, though they are also highlighted in your annual report that's in front of you. One of the concerns that we've talked about routinely is the high cost of acute psychiatric inpatient services. The average cost now is $950 a day. We did have a presentation where we talked about our mobile crisis unit. One of the things that we're trying to do with the mobile crisis is to directly address the cost of inpatient psychiatric costs. And in January, we started the mobile crisis where law enforcement may contact our mobile crisis unit if they have somebody that they're concerned about. 60% of the time, law enforcement utilized mobile crisis for 68 cases. In 80% of those cases, the situation were able to be diverted from hospitalization. So 53 times out of the 68 contacts. And I think we had highlighted that there's cost savings associated with keeping folks in the community. It provides better service for them. When folks get out of hospitalization, they are also responsible for bills if they don't have insurance, and can certainly alleviate some of the stress associated with receiving a large bill.
Who staffs that, Fred?
We contract for that service through Northwest Passage. I think it's their guidance clinic.
They're the ones that are available from 4 p.m. until midnight.
That's correct. And that's the time that, in discussions with law enforcement, was the opportunity to most utilize the mobile crisis service. This just shows the number of involuntary admissions as compared to voluntary. For those individuals that work with us, the relative placement into acute psychiatric care is low. That would be primarily through our outpatient mental health services as well as our community support program. That number has dipped a little bit again in 2006, but with increasing daily costs, it's still a significant cost to the county. I do say that we bill clients for those services, but the county does assure payment to the vendors and then billing consumers for rather large bills and sliding fees that may be applicable. We don't necessarily recoup all the money that we expend. Chemical dependency admissions, our detox, for those folks that need detoxification, 90% of those individuals are alcohol-related detox, others are drug-related, but that, again, spiked in 2006. On a brighter note, the number of inpatient stays that the county ended up working with remained relatively flat. You heard earlier tonight the discussion on methamphetamine and the work that the county has done in that regard. The Health and Human Services Department has been part of the drug court team, as part of work done in the jail, and staff report that individuals that are coming in for services report methamphetamine as a drug of choice less frequently now than they previously did. I don't know that it's maybe more anecdotal, but I think the information is probably true in terms of the number of inpatient stays, and we're seeing less psychiatric hospitalizations due to methamphetamine. So there may be the opportunity to celebrate a little bit of success there, but there's still more work to be done as you look at the number of folks that have been detoxed over the last year. And long-term support, this is a listing of some of the achievement. There's a statewide autism program, and we had 24 children served by that program. We did ramp up some of our respite care program and use county match for partially funded waiver programs, so we were able to leverage federal dollars and provide a little bit more services to 14 children. We have relocation and diversion for nursing homes, a new program of the state that we were able to move 19 folks out of nursing homes or divert them from nursing home care, and prepared for transition to long-term care reform. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about long-term care reform, but we have spent approximately 18 months worth of planning. This board passed a resolution on April 17th. We've had opportunity for consumer feedback on at least 2 occasions. We've done surveys, and we plan to do more. And certainly there have been some concerns about the change that we've received from consumers with regard to choice and or experience of a care management provider coming in and handling services in St. Croix County. But on the flip side, when you look at this chart in terms of the various buckets of money for consumers that receive services, this number has remained relatively unchanged over the last few years, where we have approximately 230 individuals receiving services for a variety of reasons. The 3 primary target groups are the elderly, the younger physically disabled, and the developmentally disabled. What you don't see on this slide is the fact that we have about 153 adults on wait list, about 117 children on wait lists, totaling probably 270 individuals. We did some fiscal analysis on what that might mean in terms of county dollars to serve those individuals, and came up with a very rough estimate, again, because care plans have not been done for all these individuals, cost a little bit over $2.2 million. And I say local match because the state has not given an increase in these allocations for the past 20 years. On a bright note with regard to long-term care reform, Joint Finance did pass a motion to bring the counties in at their current 2006 contribution, and apparently the governor agreed to it, and we'll see what happens in the final budget bill. What that means for St. Croix County is we'd spent about $2.6 or $2.7 million in 2007. That would be our county contribution. Over a 5-year period, that contribution could be brought down to 22% of our basic county allocation, which would be approximately $350,000 to $400,000. Now, there's a lot of skeptics out there that say, where are we going to come up with all the money to serve all these individuals? But if that does happen, and this board does approve after a fiscal analysis that, a more complete analysis, that this is what it will mean to St. Croix County, it could mean a significant cost reduction, the elimination of wait lists, and that money could be used for other purposes, most notably some of the children that are on wait lists. Birth to 3 is also part of our long-term care service delivery system. HFS 90 requires that the county provide screening, evaluation, and service coordination for those individuals. Serve about 125 children, 70 on average in a month time, on a monthly average for caseloads. We do also have St. Croix Industries. St. Croix Industries 3 programs are listed here. Work services, community employment, and day services. There is information in your handout with regard to the detail of those, so I won't go into much more other than the demand has required a little bit of wait list, and that may be due to actual physical space to provide services as well as funding. This would be a target group that would be covered in terms of long-term care reform. It is a concern for staff there as well because the care management organization, as we have outlined our planning, would be, they would be a contract with the care management organization. And would a care management organization continue to contract with that service? My anticipation would be yes, because there's no other work services program in the area, but I can't predict long range what that might mean. But in the short run, it has created a little bit of concern for some of the staff. Economic support is also a program. These are the primary services that are provided. Medical assistance expenditures in St. Croix County were almost 31 million. In 2006, it was down a little bit. I asked Mary Squire, our economic support supervisor, why she thought it might be down, and it can vary to a large extent, and there's detail in your report, but there may be 3 or 4 high-cost surgeries that were not part of 2006 that were part of the 2005 expenditures. Food share is up a little bit, as you can see. One of the concerns that I hear routinely in our department, and one of the things that I think is borne out here is the economic support caseloads continue to rise. The staff have 500 plus caseload as a caseload per worker. We're not able to meet time frames for responding to consumers in our performance measures, and I anticipate that in 2008 budget, as was requested in 2007 but was dropped as part of the budgeting process, but we'll be needing to add staff in our economic support unit. One of the things here is that, particularly with long-term care reform, because you need to meet financial and functional eligibility, financial eligibility is determined by economic support. So caseloads there, I would anticipate, would go up just by virtue of the fact that they're going to have the possibility of implementing long-term care reform in St. Croix County. For 2006, total revenues, $28,163,000. We have a revenue balance of $333,000. About 155 of that is earmarked for programs. The rest would be a county levy of 178,000 approximately. These are, as well as nursing home, these are unaudited numbers. The auditor will be planning to come to the Health and Human Services Committee in July and give a formal report, but we anticipate that these numbers are fairly close. County appropriations, $6.95 million approximately for all of our services. Two things that I'd like to highlight on the revenues. 2005 carryover applied to the 2007 budget, $244,000. We had a fund balance. All of that money was applied to the 2007 budget. And also there was a carryover of WMCR, Wisconsin Medicaid Cost Report. We had $264,000 surplus, and that was an 06 revenue that was actually applied in the 07 budget, or excuse me, the 08 budget. No, 07, we're not doing I'm just thinking about the 2008 budget.
Will you have those numbers available for 2008?
For the audited numbers?
No. Will there be similar carryovers available going from '07 into the '08 budget?
Well, it's early to tell on the '07 budget, but thus far things look fairly close to on target. But the '07 final audit won't be done until the middle of 2008. So if there is any fund balance left over for 2008, it would be applied to the 2009 budget, not the 2008. There's a year lag there. And this would highlight some of the expenditures, and I'm not going to go through them in detail, but you would have those in your annual report. I tried to zip through that quickly in the interest of time.
Well, it's an awful lot to cover. Members are seeing this, of course, for the first time tonight. Somebody made a point to me after the last meeting that they feel it's unfair to be given all these numbers and then given just one short moment to press Fred with the explanations for them. And I assured the person that he's willing to take questions at any time, now or in the future or whatever. I'm sure I do not misrepresent you, do I?
You do not. I would be happy to answer questions, or obviously we'll be back. I'll be back in July, and there would be opportunity to get questions to me then. I could have staff available if you want to get into detailed questions that I might not be able to answer at the program level, but if you keep it simple in general, I might be able to answer a few questions.
Let's see what questions there are now, or did you wish to emphasize some points, Ms. Wentz, before we take questions? No. Mr. Strumke, you have a question?
Question or a point. We were talking about the COP program, Community Options Program, and are we getting feedback here? The waiting list is of a concern to me. The report here shows a waiting list with 77 people on it. And then I took a look at 2006 for a total cost of $2.452 million, which comes out to just under $25,000 per person. If you go back to the COP, it looks like we're buying stuff that I would think that Social Security would buy, Medicare or somebody, as far as wheelchairs and other stuff. Do we go to them first for monies or reimbursement? I assume we do. I hope we do.
The waiver programs will pay for a variety of services geared towards keeping individuals in their home. And if the list is there indicating that, and I don't have that annual report, it's in my briefcase, I thought I had brought it up here, but if it indicates that those are the types of services that'll be paid for through the waiver, where you have, in most instances, a local match and then the federal money, they can be purchased through the waiver, but I'd have to look at the specific.
Okay, that was a general question. The next one, the just shy of $25,000 per person, is that our cost, the taxpayers' cost here, or is that being matched or split or something by state and federal revenue?
Again, with all the various buckets of money with regard to long-term care reform, and I could have Ron Lockwood provide a more detailed response and forward that to the board, there are some programs that are fully funded, so there is no local match, but they're not meeting demand in St. Croix County, and so the county, when I talk about $2.7 million allocated to fund these programs in 2007 or 2006, excuse me, many of them do have local match. So I'd have to look at the specific program to be able to tell you whether there is a local 42% match or whether there's been state funds available. But again, those state funds have been frozen for the last 20 years, and if we're going to meet consumer needs and demand, the county has graciously contributed a relatively high percentage in comparison to other counties in this region.
Yeah, I just got one summation, kind of a statement question. As you were addressing the issue of what to do as the ever-increasing seniors as far as nursing home potential needs, and one of the things I think the country's going to is in-home care, where they don't come in the nursing homes. And that's where this 77 number, in my mind, is going to go up. And when we're looking at dollars, I just took those 77 times the 24,800 and came up with a $1.9 million figure, and we could do away with that waiting list. The question comes, if anybody's got an inventive mind here, about 80% of that could come from one source. And so, you know, there are ways to spend our money, and I think that's a decision this board really needs to look at on, you know, getting the best bang for it. Thank you.
If I may, I had a similar question. I think you said the long-term support unit, which deals with adults as well as children, presently serves about 320 recipients at a cost of $2.6 million, but has a waiting list of 153 adults and 117 children, a total of 270, that would cost $2.2 million to serve. Did I get that right?
Yes, if the approximation that the
case studies haven't been done to
Right.
drill into the detail yet.
But the board wanted to know, Health and Human Services Committee wanted to know what people were waiting for, and so we gave a bit of detail around that, as well as what the cost would be based on level of need. And Ron Lockwood ran a scenario, and the cost would have been about $2.2 million. If things continue as they are without long-term care reform, if the county wanted to eliminate wait lists in St. Croix County for kids and for adults, it would be a tab of approximately $2.2 million without long-term care reform.
And those people would be served in most cases in their homes.
Yes. Yeah, their homes, community-based residential facilities, apartments, those types of things.
The least obtrusive type of setting, I take it.
Yeah, yes.
I don't have the technically right word. Anyway, not to belabor it. Any other questions? Mr. Mortensen.
Yes, I think you mentioned under long-term reform that the serving all people on the waiting list, it would cost the county additional money to start with. And then after, I don't know, a time period, is it 5 years? Okay, then it would go down. Well, who would make up the difference in the time there that those payments, that it would go down for the county?
The first, just so I'm clear, the $2.2 million approximate cost would be if we continue our programs as they are today. So if we continue to work on all of the various buckets of money where people need to meet different functional eligibility criteria, it would cost the county about $2.2 million. Now, if we don't do anything about the wait list, but we pursue long-term care reform, our current allocation in the 06 final reconciliation is going to be approximately 2.6 to 2.7 million. That contribution would go towards, as well as all of the funds that state and federal would go towards a capitated rate to the care management organization to pay for services for consumers on a monthly basis, and it's an actuarially sound rate that for any consumer, this is you get approximately $2,000 to $2,600 a month on average, depending on need. Now, the plan that was proposed from Joint Finance to the governor and is supported and endorsed by Wisconsin Counties Association is to buy down the county contribution to 22%, which is what the family care counties, where they have a family care program where there's no wait list, that's what they had to expend out of their allocation that goes to Health and Human Services to buy into family care. So it would take us about 5 years to get down to that amount from 2.6 or 2.7 million to 400,000, let's say. What would make up the difference in terms of funding? Well, that would have to come out of state and or federal allocation. It would no longer be a county responsibility as I understand it. But I'm not quite sure where that funding would come from.
There is some thought that the services could be made more efficient. There could be some savings. But, wow,
yes, that is.
It's all kind of pie in the sky at this point.
There is certainly studies out there that show efficiencies that are generated as a result of a managed care approach and managing both acute and primary needs along with individual consumers' long-term care needs.
The one I was mailed looked like this. Dennis, are you presenting? Okay, the floor is yours. Mr. Kruger, are you leading off on the government center property status? Okay. Don't choke on your drink there. It's non-alcoholic for the sake of the viewing audience. Do we know? Right, microphone, and are you making some kind of a motion or what?
I would like to bring the government property status report to the floor. And I would like to have Dennis come up and give our presentation for the Finance Committee. Is that possible?
Well, of course that's possible. You're in charge of presenting it as chairman of the Finance Committee. However, using whatever spokespersons you want to, I suppose. What are you planning that he will give us the same summary as last month, or will it be different?
The fact of the matter is that the summary is basically the same. The final report has been forwarded to all the board members and has been placed on the internet. So there's really nothing new to report other than the discussion that took place at the Finance Committee.
All right, and the discussion at the last Finance Committee meeting, I was there, and the bottom line of that was all that's changed since the previous month is the last trickle of comments in from out county, if you will. From the comment period remained open, and those comments did not change, so the conclusions are what we find in the executive summary. Is that right?
Yes, we only had one comment. And we only had one comment from the town board of Somerset, who was objecting to selling any excess property. And I think everybody got a copy of that letter.
Mr. Chairman, we did receive notice also, or response, I should say, from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, excuse me, regarding endangered resources, and that report also was placed on file and discussed with the Finance Committee.
So what are you proposing, Mr. Kruger?
I believe our next step was to have it going to plan with our rezoning and going to the city of Hudson to get the southern half of the property rezoned.
Okay, so I'm looking at page 7, Roman numeral 4, next steps, based on the county plan for the plan conceptual framework, where it says the board will have to decide on the appropriateness of the conceptual site plan. And that conceptual site plan is northern half.
We are going to retain.
Reconfirmed with the city because they're doing comprehensive planning, so reconfirm that that's for governmental and residential uses. Southern half, that is the southern 2 quadrants, rezone for multiple use, is that right? So that's what you're asking for the board to approve, is that conceptual plan. Why don't you make it a motion and we'll use Robert's rules on it.
I want to make a motion that we follow with our plan, which our conceptual plan was, is to keep the northern half, the northern two most quadrants, the northwest and the northeast, and to develop go with the plan to develop the southern half of it. Yeah, just to get it rezoned.
The 47 acres would stay the same, be confirmed with the city so that they incorporate it into their plan. As I said, for governmental and residential use, the way the zoning is now. And the south 35 acres, an application be made to the city for land use and zoning approvals for a change in the zoning from residential to mixed use.
I second that, right?
You're seconding that, Mr. Kaplan? Okay, discussion, debate. Are you ready to vote?
What are you talking about mixed use?
Library, fire station, retail, offices. Yeah, what's covered in here. Is that what your understanding of the report? Mr. Marzoff.
Dennis, I just had a question with respect to numbers. On page 5, where reference is made to the northwest quadrant recommendation and the northeast quadrant, the sum of those two acreages is 47.9 acres. When subtracted from the 82 acres that we have been told exist, that leaves a balance of 34.1 remaining acres. But on page 11, where the quadrant map is located, there's the 16.4 and the 31.5, again, the northern quadrants, but the sum of 7.2, 8.7, and 15.2 is 31.1 as opposed to 34.1, and I'm wondering where the other acreage went.
Good. It ended up being the pond and a piece of right-of-way.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, there was 57% of the site remains with the county, and 35, or what is that, 43% would be the acreages that would be rezoned for mixed uses.
Yeah, I guess I got a couple of questions and maybe some concerns, but what the motion is to rezone the property. And now, does the rezoning that we're going to propose, does it cause us to have to sell the property at less than market? I know this plan says we're going to sell at less than market for some of it, as I recall the last time. Well, I just want to ask a few questions because I want to have some heads saying that yes or no on
No, there's nothing anywhere that says that anything would be sold below market.
I've found no constituent that I've talked to, and I haven't done any polls, people I've run into, I found nobody that is endorsing the idea of selling the property. And if we're going to sell it, I find most people are saying you better get market price for it. Now, I don't talk with too many people from the city of Hudson. It's mainly people on the other side of County A. If we decide, I guess rezoning, we're just going to continue marching towards this sale thing, it would appear. I think the property needs to be rezoned to get the rezoning out of the way, but I think we need to have some hurdles to go over before we go to sale. I'd like to suggest, we just went through a thing on non-metallic mining where we're going to look at, it was, kind of preserving clean water. And we went through quite a bit of hoops to show that we did get the public input, et cetera. And I'd like to suggest, if we're going to go sell this property, do something, we go back out into the public and we take some of the meetings out to the other side of the county so we can hear from some people from the other side of the county. Because people of the county own the land, not City Hudson. I'd like to give them a chance to voice opinions. I know I didn't think we were going to give a big response on the website, okay? But I do think if we went out and had an opportunity, hold a couple of meetings for people to comment when we've got a plan of what we're really going to do, I think that would be well serving the public interest on this piece of property. That's all.
Well, this all seems to be marching right along toward a sale, and in fact, this page 7 talks about actual construction on the site may be possible in 2008. And I'm just wondering, you know, why would we be trying to sell into a depressed real estate market? I mean, our objective should be to try to get the most value, the most money possible for the taxpayers, but this would not seem to be the greatest time in the world to be trying to sell something.
Rezoning is not a sale. I don't want to belabor the obvious, but the timing of the sale would be an entirely different question. Would need county board approval, specific approval of selling the property. We've always talked that way in Plan for a Plan, and have brought, you know, the finance committee is, you've put the finance committee in charge of dealing with this, and it has brought every step back to this full board. There's no reason to change that. Anybody else want to be heard before we deal with the motion? Mr. Strumke.
My daughter told me I can use the excuse that I'm getting old because I forget stuff. And so it may be appropriate here too. We're talking here about selling the land. I know we're just talking about rezoning, but that's the preparatory towards sale. And I got to ask, the question is, did we ever as a board vote to sell the land? Or did we vote to move forward with a plan to sell the land? And it just seems like we're running pretty fast here with this plan, and now we're rezoning, and the board has not voted to even sell the land. And with that, did anybody ever look at a long-term plan? I know I've seen one historically on what's going to be needed. On this site, we're looking at a nursing home issue. We may be looking at moving health and human services. There's a lot of stuff going on here. I think we need to consider all this stuff before we go forward with this rezoning and sale without at least a clear vote.
I see this as not a direction to a sale, but with the fact that the city of Hudson is trying to do a long-range plan for where their commercial and governmental and so forth will be, and I just see this as a important step in being able to give them the opportunity to know what our intentions are so they can include that in their plan.
This board has been working with the Ayers and Associates, and Ayers and Associates, the architects headquartered in Eau Claire, who've done our work on this site for the last few things, have provided a report to Health and Human Services and a report to the Finance Committee, both of them talking about additions to this structure, to this building on this site. I think maybe Mr. Whiting, you'd be a good person to summarize what is the conclusion of what can be done on this site to meet the needs of this county for the next 2 decades.
The building improvements that Mr. Brown from Ayers and Associates shared with the Finance Committee a couple of weeks ago was based on discussions with all the departments in the Hudson facility and the New Richmond facility. In his, I think I can characterize it as preliminary estimate, he sketched a footprint of a 2-story building attached to the north side of this building that's about half the size of this building. The other likely additions to this building in the future would be another jail pod that's been speculated on for as long as I've been here. You've already done the Huber addition. The interest in having an enclosed space for the Sheriff's Department impound lot, and perhaps even some indoor parking for comm van or some other county equipment could be viewed as a basement level area underneath the other 2 stories that would go out this office building. That was about the extent of what he saw. There would be some parking lot improvement that would have to go along with that, but that would be speculative only on decisions that the board would make someday about the future of the New Richmond buildings.
Let me try to give the 30,000 feet global view. Everything that the county has in offices could be constructed on this northwest quadrant. Everything that's in New Richmond, everything that's in Baldwin would fit in the northwest quadrant. We'd only have to go to the northeast quadrant, the other half of the north half of this property, if we wanted to bring highway over here. I don't believe we want to, but you know, we can do all of that and fit it on what we've got, attaching it to this building. Mr. Cranmer.
I think you reversed it. You said northeast where you should have said northwest.
You're right, I did. Everything can be done.
Yes, thank you. My understanding is that even with an application for rezoning to the city of Hudson so that they can come up with their plan, the zoning that we're requesting, the rezoning we're requesting would still allow us to use that space for county government buildings. Is that correct?
Yes. Oh, yes. Government buildings can be built in any
Right.
county district in the city of Hudson.
So I don't see that, I personally don't see that asking for a rezoning in any way indicates that we're ready to sell that property.
Mr. Standifer.
I don't know how others would define moving too rapidly, but we're now into the 4th year of discussing a plan for a plan, so that doesn't seem to me by any stretch of the imagination to be undue haste. I think we're moving slowly and cautiously. And with respect to Supervisor Raymond's observation that he's not talked to anyone that's in favor of selling the land, frankly, I've not talked to anyone that's in favor of continuing to sit on unused land that has no identified purpose. And I think that's what we've been trying to do, is identify a vision and a plan for appropriate utilization of the property. The analysis that has developed into the document that you see in front of you has included a high amount of public input and public dialogue, and it has led to a couple of conclusions. Most importantly, I think the conclusion that a portion of the property, which are identified as the 2 northern quadrants, are probably appropriately at this time set aside from any consideration for rezoning or other uses, that there may be clear possibilities that they would be utilized for either county government services or appropriately used for adjacent neighborhood areas, preservation of woods and walking trails. I think that's come out of that whole process. But also, as many of you know, we have been approached on a piecemeal basis over the last number of years by different entities interested in a piece of the property. They have included private uses, public uses, a variety of uses, all of which have been fended off, indicating that we're not interested in piecemealing any of that property until there's a clear overarching vision of where we're going in the future. And that's starting to emerge, which not only includes identified public uses such as a joint library, which potentially would serve a large constituency, not just the city of Hudson, but the contiguous towns as well, a public safety building that would be strategically located potentially in this area, not only to serve the city of Hudson, but the village of North Hudson and the contiguous towns around this area. So there is coming together a cooperative vision of mixed-use public-private on that property to appropriately use it. Right now, the highest and best use of that land, if you'd look out there, obviously is growing volunteer cedar trees, because that's all it's being used for, which doesn't seem like a very good plan to me. And I think that as we've moved through this process, and I refresh your memory again, now into the 4th year, we're starting to see a cooperative consensus of a vision for the use of that property that far exceeds the way it's being used now.
I heard this evening thoughts of New Richmond coming down here, Baldwin coming down here, using this land and space. Our population is going to increase in the next 10, 20, 30 years. I think we're moving along pretty fast right at this point, and I just think that it should be, well, I'm in favor, not for sale.
Yeah, my point to Mr. Supervisor Standifer and others is, I think the effort on the plan has been pretty Hudson-centric because the property is. And I think that when you look at it, it looks like a good plan put together by consultants that know what they're doing based on the public input they got. But I think the public input, the meetings were held in Hudson. I think the people that have a vested interest in the use of the property have come from Hudson. And I think we owe it to the balance of the people in St. Croix County to give them a look at it, a good thorough look at it. If this turns out to be the blueprint, let's take it out to the whole county and have them take a look at it and comment on it. I can see the obvious conclusion from a Hudson standpoint is the way the property is being proposed to use. The city of Hudson gets use of it, the library gets use of it, the YMCA gets a piece of it, all the interest groups that cluster around it get to use it. I don't know that I'm for or against that, but I think the balance of the county gets to comment on that. And I've held a lot of public hearings on land use and planning and zoning, and it's the people that show up are the people that have a vested interest. And I think on something this big, we've got a different duty to the balance of the county to talk with them about it. We may well do this, but I think we got to give everybody a comment period, and give them a chance to say something on it.
I don't want to speak for you, Mr. Kruger, but I do want to suggest, can you think of any reason that a meeting couldn't be held in some other part of the county at the same time that we're proceeding with the rezoning? I mean, there's going to be lots of time. There's no offers to accept. There's no sale proposal.
I think rezoning the property, providing it doesn't limit our use, needs to be done now. The best thing you can do with a piece of property is get it rezoned so that you have the option of the highest and best use. I'm talking about as we go forward. I think we're on a track to go sell the property fairly quickly, and I don't want to debate that tonight. But before we do that, I want to give the citizens a chance to take the kick at the can. I'm not trying to delay a rezoning, because I think that's the right thing to do. You said it doesn't limit our use. I think it's the right thing to do.
Yes, my concerns have been satisfied in the fact that all we're really talking about is rezoning. As long as we retain use of this, we're not asking for bids, we're not looking for anything. I see no problem. I have no objections to the rezoning.
All right. Mr. Marzoff.
First, Dennis, I would like to thank you sincerely for the work that I've observed since February 8th when you made your first presentation to the Finance Committee. In all of the dialogue that has ensued since then, and in all, if not much, if not all of the literature that has been printed, I've read and seen words like major players, investors, developers. Conspicuous by its absence in all of this, it seems to me, is any mention of the legacy that we're going to leave to future generations. We're looking at a unique piece of land in a very unique community. And if you look around at what has already been developed in close proximity to this, there's an awful lot of vacant real estate. 2 more closings took place last week over by Brugger's coffee shop. and that's just a stone's throw from where we are. Anyway, the purpose of my vocalization at this time is to ask us all to please give careful consideration to the legacy that you want to leave to your children, your grandchildren, and for years ahead. If we don't do this right, it's irreversible, and it would be a tragic mistake.
I take it that's a rhetorical statement. If you had something about what's immediately before us that you thought was wrong, you would be saying it.
Pardon me? Could you restate that?
Is there something about this motion that you think is wrong, Mr. Marzoff?
I think the motion is necessary in terms of pursuing the purpose for which the Barsness Corporation was hired as consultants.
Good. On that note, we will call for a vote. All in favor should now vote
Could I
aye.
ask for a voice vote, please?
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I meant a roll call vote. If it's appropriate, could I ask for a
We will re-vote by roll call.
I thought that's what you meant.
After that, we'll take up item number 5 on our agenda. I think that's you, Michelle.
Wally have you here. Wally?
Wally, you first.
Supervisor?
Yes.
John Mortensen?
No.
Esther Wentz?
Yes.
Gene Ritz?
Yes.
Gordon Awesome?
Yes.
Tom Kaplish? Chuck Strumke?
Yes.
Richard Marzoff?
No.
Sharon Norton Bowman?
Yes.
Ron Troyer?
Yes.
Roger Rebholz?
Yes.
Bill Cranmer?
Yes.
Daryl Standifer?
Yes.
John Borup?
Yes.
Clarence Malick?
Yes.
Don Jordan?
Yes.
Ron Raymond?
Yes.
Cindy Leonard?
Yes.
Linda Lucky? Stan Kruger?
Yes.
Denise Gunderson? No. Lois Burry?
Yes.
Brian Hurchin?
No.
Julie Spear is gone. Joe Hurchin?
No.
Bill Peavy? Gerald Peterson?
Yes.
Charlie Grant?
No.
Tom Dowd?
No.
Chuck Mills?
Yes.
And Dick King?
No.
Did it pass?
Yeah. 21 to 8.
That's just rezoning.
Fund loan. Number 5 on the agenda. Is this a finance committee motion? And let's see, we have something that looks like this. Huh?
Right. And
Motion by Kruger, second by Standifer. Anybody need a discussion of it? This is the second half of what we did last month. This is the wording that the state insists on. All in favor, vote aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes. Number 6, budget review. Kruger, Whiting, or what?
we passed out the levy of, the sheet looks like this. Came with you people. We had it for the department head, the committee chairs meeting this past month, this current month. And you can see if we're looking at expenditure increases expected, that salary and fringes and health insurance is going to eat up everything of levy increase that we have proposed. That's nothing for capital outlay or other positions. We also put in the nursing home levy. We don't know what's going to happen with that situation, but we just showed that there is a variance and there is some problems there. So we do have our work cut out for us.
I guess they want it. I'll go back.
Is there any questions on it?
Why did you pick 2%, 3%, and 4% increases, these columns?
Okay, well, we have been, the 2% is what we are under now. The state law is 2%. The 4% is what Governor Doyle has proposed to the legislature, and then we just took a middle number there. We were over that last year in new construction, and I think our new construction was, Michelle, was that 6.4 last year? About 6.4, and we know this year we think it's going to be around the 3% or lower factor. So we just use the 2%, which is available under the current law, the 4%, which Governor Doyle proposed increase in his message, and we took the 3% as our other factor.
Every year we have problems, and I hope we're not going to borrow again next year. But because we're just deferring increased debt. But at the Wisconsin Counties Association 2 years ago, I talked to some county supervisors down there that sat down and got the chairman or the chairperson of all the committees in their county and sat down, listed every appropriation that they spend money on, prioritized them, and listed them as mandated, partially, or not mandated. And they put them in priority 1, they must do, all the way down, and they had 700 and some programs, the one county I talked to, big county. I don't know if it's too late to do that for us, for next year's budget, but I think it's a darn good idea that we sit down and figure out, because I think there's some I would be surprised, and I would think other supervisors would be surprised on all the different programs that we spend money on. And again, 2 issues there. We look at a list of priorities, and we look at all the lists that we actually do. I just put that out there for discussion. So.
Back us up and do a roll call vote. And that probably starts with District 12, huh? Well, this is the borrowing resolution that we just passed, that one.
Is everybody clear on that?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
that one, right. So the previous agenda item.
Hey, John Mortensen?
Yes.
Esther Wentz?
Yes.
Jean Ritz? Yes. Gordon Awesome? Tom Kaflish? Chuck Strumke?
No.
Richard Marzoff?
Yes.
Sharon Norton Bauman?
Yes.
Ron Troyer?
No.
Roger Rubholz?
Yes.
Bill Cranmer?
Yes.
Daryl Standifer?
Yes.
John Borup?
Yes.
Clarence Malick?
Yes.
Don Jordan?
Yes.
Ron Raymond? Cindy Leonard?
Yes.
Linda Lucky?
Yes.
Stan Kruger?
Yes.
Denise Gunderson?
Yes.
Lois Burry?
Yes.
Brian Hirchin?
Yes.
Joe Hirchin? Gerald Peterson?
Yes.
Charlie Grant?
Yes.
Tom Dowd?
Yes.
Chuck Mells?
Yes.
Dick King?
Yes.
Wally Habhager?
Still passes, but the vote will be noted in the official.
Thank you, Dick. And a couple, 3 years ago, the Transportation Committee and the Highway Department, in our conversations and in the county goal-setting sessions, were tasked with looking at alternative revenue sources, in particular how they relate to highway. And as we cussed and discussed that over the last couple years, last year I think we brought a couple forward and shared them with the Finance Committee, and since then we've really accelerated our research. And I've worked with the state auditor for 17 years, and we worked with the Corporation Council on some of the legal aspects of how to move forward. And so this is just an introduction on what we're looking for in relation to dependable transportation. Costs money, and inadequate transportation costs even more money in terms of lost productivity, missed technology opportunities, which we've been exploring as well, and wasted time and safety. And with that, we have a whole basket, fruit basket full of ideas that we shot around to each other and to various organizations that we belong to and work with. And this is just a list of those that we've talked about and discussed. Of course, our infamous property taxes, bonding and borrowing, hotel motel tax we talked about last year, and now we find that that is something that's not more transportation related. We don't even think a county can do that. It's more of a municipality. I'll share with you in a little bit. State programs, which we do a lot of. When Tommy Thompson was governor, his goal and the intention was 30% to transportation aids, and when I started at St. Croix County 17 years ago, it was 27%, and that formula is supposed to be 30% of our 6-year average of eligible costs. And now it's shrunk to 22.5. So it's going in the wrong direction as far as how much money we get back from the state transportation fund. Local roads, cost-sharing formulas, we found some $28,000 one year in some formula errors. Federal programs, had a fortunate opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and see how those programs are moving forward. In our Wisconsin WCHA conference a couple weeks ago, or a week ago, we've been working with the state on these programs and trying to streamline them. The state audited all the states, and now we're trying to streamline the streamlining process. Wisconsin was named as one of the 14 opportunity states in relation to safety, and now we find out they dumped that in what's called an HES program, hazardous elimination, that is more difficult to obtain. Last year I filled one out myself, and I spent a considerable amount of time and effort getting it filled in. Talked to another commissioner, he spent $2,800 just filling out the application. These types of things is what we've been running into. Just want to share with you on some of the frustrations we had in moving forward and looking at some of these alternatives. Another ooh-ah moment we had was we got a 994 going through our county, and it was built for military purposes to carry military equipment. Kind of exhausted that one. That was just an idea. Homeland Security funds, and the state general transportation funds, some other states' transportation dollars are taken out of there. Ours are not. Motor fuel tolls, motor fuel sales taxes, vehicle registration fees, vehicle sales tax, vehicle-related sales tax, other local opportunities that other states and some other municipalities in Wisconsin take advantage of. We don't have that option that we're aware of yet on some of those items. You see the overweight fines and vehicle rental fees and traffic violations. These are just some of those that we thought about. So one of the alternatives that we looked at, though, that currently sticks out as our most viable and probable and doable is that vehicle registration fee. Counties can charge one. So can towns, and so can other municipalities. So why a vehicle registration fee? Well, the local government revenue options that I got from Doug Meek, our state auditor, that shows some points in it. Wisconsin's local governments may levy only those taxes that are authorized by the legislature. In addition to the property tax, the legislature has authorized 3 optional local taxes. One is the county sales tax, which we already do. The other is registration fee. And the third is a room tax or the hotel motel tax that we spoke about earlier. But looky there, it's only the municipals, not the counties, that can do that. So with that in mind, and there's one other thing, it's a special purpose district, and you've heard of the Packer football stadium being taxed with those types of entities can be created as a special tax entity as well. There is some provisions for that. But the counties are only able to levy number 1 and number 2, with number 1 all currently being exercised, that leaves us with number 2 to explore further. And with that, we did. So why one in St. Croix County? Well, Wisconsin statute allows it. It's reliable, dependable source of county revenue year after year based on the number of vehicles we have. We have a demonstrated need for the additional financial resources as the Highway Department to ensure that the money will be spent to maintain the existing facilities. The General Maintenance Transportation Fund in St. Croix County have dramatically changed in the last few years, which we've all been hearing about. The Highway Department budget has not been able to keep pace with these cost increases, especially the material cost increases. So the monies generated by the county registration fee would be in addition to the yearly levy requests that must continue to grow also with the ever increasing cost to maintain our public highways. And it's also a fairly straightforward revenue source to implement. And talking with Greg, there'd be looking at the procedures and how to do that. Oh, by the way, if you have a question, please note the slide number down on the bottom. I can refer right back to that. Pardon me? Yeah, in a bit. I have a moment first. Our general routine maintenance on the resurfacing materials has cost in the last 2 years have gone up 59% on just our hot mix and 71% on our chip seal. And we have 70 to 80%, and it's probably higher than that because of the increased material costs. 70 to 80% of the cost of these types of projects are in materials. So the need for the increased funding just to maintain the roads has gone up beyond our ability to keep pace with our traditional funding sources. And we all are paying an arm and a leg on our firstborn, as is the Highway Department, already at the pump. So when we hear gas tax, we've already been there, and I understand that that is not where we want to be going with that in relation to the state tax, and I'll show you a little bit of that as we go on. And if Chuck wants to hand it out as we keep moving, that's fine. Recent maintenance material costs, here's some that we shared with the Transportation Committee. We've been talking with it for a while. These are the cost increases from the previous year on just these two materials, just hot mix and just the road oil. 11%, 23% from 2005, and 23% from 2006. And when we look at the hot mix just itself, and we look at our base year of 2004, where it was fairly flat as far as our increases, 2005, we thought we could handle, we had a 4% increase almost, and then boom, 37.8% in 2006, and that's when we went goofy. 2007 now, we just took proposals in April, 11% again. So 11% on top of 37% on top of 4% on top of the 55%. So these are increases from the previous year, just a management at a glance show for you. And here again are those two material prices, those two materials, hot mix and chip seal oil. $20.25 in April of 04, and our base year when we took proposals, and in April of 07 it's $32. Multiplied by the 16 programmed miles that the county board adopted in the late 80s, has just a material increases of almost $1 million, $920,000, just in those two material prices for our programmed number of miles. And that does not include the reduction that we've done because we haven't been able to meet our 16 and we haven't been able to meet our 54. So we have that issue on top of this issue. This is a concept of preventative maintenance that the Federal Highways has put out, and it just shows the half bell curve of the life cycle of a road. I'm sure a house is similar, and new technology will help spread that out, I hope. But for every dollar we spend in the two programs that I just shared with you, in our patching and that type of stuff, will save us $4 to $5 in road construction later on, similar to a house. And that's where we want to focus our energies so we can extend the life of the road and extend our budget dollars, from our program to our 6-year plan to our budget. As far as the alternatives that we have looked at previous in our opportunity we've had to look at on a federal level, again, I want to revisit that just a little bit to share that it is not good. And the TDA, Transportation Development Association, does fear that the Highway Trust Fund, the federal one, will go bankrupt by 2009 because of the issues out there. And the short-term strategies need to be found to prevent the drawdown of the fund and the economic impacts that would result. And highways, we share in that battle with transit, aviation, Amtrak, ports, harbors, and waterways, so we're not alone in that battle. On the state level, we have the similar situation, and here again, we have 30 to 40, 65% yearly road funding increases needed. On top of that, we have our gas tax indexing that came out from the last legislature go-around. We have the pothole liability bill that got vetoed again, so now we're more liable than the state itself on the state's roads as a county, pardon me. Weight limits were increased, reducing the life of our roads on top of all that. For the timber industries and other industries are after that same issue. We're worried about our bridges. Our bridges cannot handle that type of weight if the whole truck is on there. And then the transfers that are not in this year's budget, the transfers over the last two bienniums are $1.1 billion, but they're not in this year's budget, which is a saving grace so far. One of the articles I clipped out of the July of last year's Pioneer Press, it echoed that same point, was that 316 million a year on the low end would be needed to catch up, and when adjusted for construction inflation, it's double that, and that's what we're seeing too. We're experiencing that same type of thing to get down to this 64%. 30% on the low end and 64% more on the higher end. Now this is a very interesting slide, and I'll spend some time on this, and I will use my laser pointer because that one tricks me. This are the various states surrounding us. This is the 5-state region, and this is from the WISDOT website. Illinois, the green is the registration fees that each of these states charge in their major city, one of the major cities. And the fuel taxes are for a 2005 mid-size sedan driven in 2006. These are the taxes, the fuel taxes and the various transportation taxes that that vehicle pays for 15,000 miles at 24.5 miles per gallon. So apples to apples, finally, we have Illinois, $461 if you add the two together, Iowa, $345, Minnesota, or Michigan, $312, Minnesota, $317, Wisconsin, $256. We're at $55 registration fee and $201 for how much we pay in fuel to the state gas tax. And then, of course, we get some of that back that I got to fight for to get back for our programs. The 4-state average without Wisconsin is $358, $102 more than what Wisconsin would be for that vehicle. All 5 states combined is $338, so Wisconsin drops the average down a bit. We're under by $82 for that year for that vehicle, apples to apples, according to WISDOT's website there. And another point to ponder, I have a lot of relatives that do this to us, and we do it too, and I think I've even done it. Don't tell anybody, but we pay $55 for our vehicle, and then we drive over to Minnesota and fill up. So we're paying, if we're in St. Croix County, and we drive over to Minnesota to fill up every day, and if we commute, I would be paying $178. So I'm better off in St. Croix County than even the rest of Wisconsin if they can't make it there and back on a tank. So there's a point to ponder. Okay, that's slide number 14. I just wanted to hesitate on that, and this is what we found as we move forward, and where are our most opportunities in alternative revenue sources. The state of Wisconsin is over here on the end. And as far as revenues and expenses, on the revenue side, Wisconsin does not have the transportation funding options of our neighboring states. In fact, it is the most limited funding source of transportation in the nation. Now, this is from TDA. The gas tax and vehicle registration fees provide over 90% of the state's transportation revenues. However, the gas tax will become less viable as a measure of system use due to the increase of fuel efficiencies and alternative fuels. Currently, there is no fuel tax on ethanol, alternative fuel, as far as we know. So we're losing the opportunity for funds to go into the state transportation fund. And this kind of demonstrates that. Oops, I misspelled that. It's motor fuel, sorry. Motor fuel tax, registration fees, bonding, and borrowing. That's where Wisconsin can do, and that's what we have done in Wisconsin. Other states have tolls, general fund appropriations, motor fuel sales tax, vehicle sales tax, et cetera, et cetera. This is just a graph to share with you, to show with you there's less going into the fund on the state side and more going out of the fund on the state side because Wisconsin funds more. Wisconsin is one of the only states in the country to fund all modes of transportation as well as the Department of Motor Vehicles and the State Patrol, primarily through the segregated fund. Again, that came from Wisconsin Department of Transportation. That was a presentation that Doug Meek gave at NACE, National Association of County Engineers, that our association sponsored in Milwaukee in April. So another news article here on our neighbors across the river, also in the Pioneer Press. Washington County had voted to have a vehicle, they called it a wheelage tax. I think that's kind of a misnomer, because then people think that you're taxing each wheel. What about the one I got in my trunk? No, I'd like to erase those kinds of conversations so we can speak to exactly to the point. It's a vehicle registration fee. That's okay if they want to call that, but I prefer not to. I even crossed off the word. So on January of 07, they started one, and they anticipate generating $925,000. Anoka did it in June, and they anticipate $1.3 million for their county, and Dakota, $1.6 million that they anticipate annual revenues into their county, over and above the other programs they have. So just for round numbers, we threw a $10 registration deal on St. Croix County and see what that would do. And in our research, a $10 one would bring about $700,000 to the Highway Department every year to help offset the increase in cost to maintain the same level of service as previous budgets, but provides a more direct correlation between those who pay the fee and those who use the service, rather than property taxpayers. Vehicle registration in the county as of this date, according to the state website, we have this many autos and this many trucks for a total of a little over 70,000 vehicles, and according to the statutes, we can only tax the 8,000 pounds and under vehicles, and that's where we get the number. So, and then they would charge a 10-cent per vehicle administrative fee to collect it like they do on all the other, and then send it back to us. So at $990 would bring us almost at $700,000. Now, they say that they would submit it yearly or as they feel different if we coach them, I guess. So it's yearly, and I don't know how else that would be or what quarter it would be or what the lag would be, but that would be determined if we want to move forward with this issue. And then some alternatives. We just threw some numbers at it for points to ponder. As we move forward into the budget process, various funding alternatives based on the number of vehicles registered on the previous screen and a 10-cent administrative fee right down the line, $10, $12, $15, $17, $20, $22, and $25 would bring in these types of money yearly for the Highway Department. And as we move forward into the budget, we'll discuss what level that would be more if you so choose. And in summary, county vehicle registration fee, from what we've gathered so far, provides an additional and reliable funding source we feel is the fairest return on the transportation dollar to the traveling public of those researched. It has minimal bureaucratic effort and goes directly to the county core service, stays in the local community and county, and it's not diluted by the other demands I shared with you earlier and competition for the funds. So I think that's it. Yes. Chuck.
Since I'm missing JLM tonight, it's neat to listen to you.
Oh, sorry.
Number 18.
18?
With the cycles, you had the breakdown of vehicles, types of, right there. Why not cycles, Timmy?
That is not allowed under the statutes, and maybe Greg could help with that, but we had to go with what came right off of the statutes and the local government revenue options that are available to us. That option is not available to us. I don't know why or anything like that, but I suppose we could campaign the legislator to do something different, but that is not an option for us at this time. Darrell?
Just a couple of pushbacks. Generally speaking, I find little to argue with in your presentation. I mean, it's just stressing when we're looking at the costs and where they're going. First of all, though, I think it's a little bit disingenuous to line up a number of other taxing jurisdictions and say their taxes are this high and we're only this high, so what we need to do is catch up with everybody else by raising taxes. Kind of a basically flawed argument. I would think maybe the others are taxing too much. Setting that aside, however, that was just an observation. Seriously, is there any direct correlation between the vehicles that are domiciled in St. Croix County that would potentially pay a vehicle registration tax and the utilization of the roads? My suspicion is that there is a high number of transit miles driven in this county because we're not only a commuting county, but we have roads going through it that make a lot of vehicles that move through our county and use our roads but don't live here. So I would need a higher level of comfort that there is a better correlation between the people that live here and would be subjected to a vehicle tax as opposed to the traffic that is actually using the roads, those that not live here getting a free pass in essence.
Well, that's a good point, and we have visited that issue. The county roads are collector roads for the most part. There are a few local roads, and they collect our traffic, mostly residences around here, to the higher functioning road, a state road and a federal road and an interstate road. And with that in mind, that would that point just shares that our traffic is using the county roads more than the state roads for that argument, and the federal roads, and ditto with the town roads. The town roads would be even more so than us, because we're collector roads and they're local roads. So, point taken, but that's the position that we were speaking to as we were going through the options and the comparisons, because when we initially started looking at this, we had nothing to compare to. And as we look at the county as a whole, they are collector type roads, and they're collecting our traffic to a higher functioning road, and that was the position that we took on that. Roger?
The other thing I think we have to make an observation of, though, the cost that the county highway department has in snow removal of roads, because we do remove a lot of snow from a lot of different roads in the county, including the freeway.
Yes, and that brought up a good point too, that we did visit the bonding and borrowing issue, and as Dick had mentioned at the Finance Committee meeting, that we are more of a pay-as-you-go type mentality or paradigm of thought, and we do not see, or we cannot find an exit strategy to fund these types of expenditures with borrowing or bonding, because these are every year. Every year it's that much. Every year we have these routine general maintenance expenditures every year. They're not the fixed asset type borrowing that you can do a break-even point or a 7-year cost analysis on to try to recoup the funds on with depreciation or anything like that. So that is a good point too. Jeff?
A couple points quick, but I need an answer to the first one. How does the state divvy up the revenue to the counties?
That's a very good question. They have a pie chart out on their website of all the different programs they have, the safety, the STP, the rural, the urban, and they divide it all up into those programs, and it's basically, some of those programs are like the Olympic Games, where you got to fill out an application and get points, and the more traffic you get points, all those types of things. And I'm not real confident in how they're distributed. I would have to look on the website and come back with that.
Okay, with that of a concern, this governor that we have last year, if I remember right, took a ton of money out of the transportation budget and put it into the education budget. And then he borrowed money to replace it because he technically couldn't do that. Now, when I was in Colorado, there was the same type governor that played games with the budget. And we don't need to say who he was. But our district, our school district, for instance, decided that we wanted to have more stuff in our school, so we raised our tax. And the governor said, well, look at the extra money you're making. I'm going to cut how much I send you. And so my concern is, and we did it twice, the citizens were fooled once and they got fooled twice, thought they could, and every year he just kept cutting the state revenue. So if we raise our revenue here somehow, my concern is what's going to be the impact that the state's going to do to the revenue that's coming to it? Are they going to say, well, look, you've got, $10 vehicle registration fee coming into you too already, so we don't have to send you so much because other counties aren't doing that?
Well, that's a good question too, and I've had the opportunity to sit on some of the boards where we're cussing and discussing again the formulas and how they're distributed. When we saw the 22.5%, that's statewide for counties. They're not singling out St. Croix County, and I'd watch Timmy jump if they single us out on that one. And so I don't see how they can actually do that. I really don't, because I think they do it on a statewide basis. They have a pot that they break up for the towns, and they divide that by the miles. They have a pot for the counties. They have a pot for their general maintenance.
But you just said the first question, which is why I asked the preparatory question. How do you determine, how does the state determine how much money goes to each county? And you said there's all these different applications and stuff.
Correct.
So the 27 point something, in my mind, very easily could be the average that goes to the counties. Not necessarily that we got 27 and so did all the other counties. I would wager that is not true.
I guess I understood, and we can look at the transportation formulas that we got back. On the back of the payment, it has the formula. And on there, it's 22.5, and I do believe that's every county. What's different is our costs. Our 6-year costs have been going up because we've been spending more, so we get more because of that, but we get less because they keep changing the formula, so it's very difficult to predict. So that also is a good point, and I don't have a specific one. Jerry?
An observation that I want to make sure that the Board of Supervisors is very well aware of, it's kind of along like with Mr. Stanford there. If we were honest with ourselves and raised our hands, how many of us buy our gasoline in Minnesota? No, I know, it's a high percentage. Now, keep in mind and realize that when we buy our gas in Minnesota with all of these commuters, we're getting no road tax. They're riding on our roads free because there's no road tax that's transferable between states. Like now in the trucking industry, it is. But as far as automobiles, so when I fill up my car in Minnesota and save 20, 30 cents, I'm driving on Wisconsin roads. I burn most of it in Wisconsin. Then the other one, Tim, you'll have to help me with a little bit. In the developmental process for our highway budget, how do we shake out on what the taxes, what we're getting from the county versus our labor? Usually the cost of our labor exceeds, through the negotiation process, what we get appropriated from the county, correct?
Correct. In 2007, I think in 2007, our labor was over $4 million and our appropriations were 3.7 or 3.8 million. So we were in comparison.
So that would mean if we paid if we paid nothing, the levy could be zero? What conclusion does this lead us to?
What I'm trying to point out here, Buck, is that the highway committee, the monies that the revenues that it receives is usually not enough to cover the cost of living, so we have to suck it up from cutting back on the number of miles of road work we do.
Or another conclusion is the money stays in the county. Most of those employees live in the county. And Mr. Kruger.
I have a question, and I guess I'm looking at it and looking at the future. If we're looking at the future, I guess I want to say if we're going to make a tax like this go, would it be possible, Greg, to write in that amendment or approval of this registration fee that all this money goes directly to the county highway department to use as on their budget? Is there somehow we can do that legally, Greg?
I can't answer that right off the bat. I'm not sure if it has to be designated to the general fund or if it can be earmarked. I'd have to check that.
Actually, that's a good point. According to the state statute, it is to be used for transportation purposes. Must use the revenues from the fee for transportation-related purposes. That's a statutory requirement. Yes. Tom?
Tim, how many other counties throughout the state do this? Is there any other ones that tack on a registration fee?
Currently, there are no counties, but there is Beloit and Sheboygan. And following 5 governments, let's see, City of Kenosha did it for a time, and Beloit is doing it. Amory in Polk County did it for a time. Marathon County did it for a time. There was years listed there, and the City of Sheboygan is still doing it. No.
Mr. Awesome.
How much were their fees and how much are the per vehicle fees in the Minnesota counties you cited?
I couldn't tell on the last 2 counties, but Washington was $5. $5 to bring the $900,000 in, so you can see they have a lot more vehicles that they can.
And how much were they in the Wisconsin counties you cited or municipalities?
In Kenosha it was $10, Beloit $10, Amory $5, Marathon $10, and Sheboygan $10.
Minnesota cycles?
I don't know. Yes. One thing I did note with the wages is that while our fellows are working for other units of government, they are paying their wages. That's why one of the reasons we can do what we do with less appropriated dollars in the wage area. But that's one of the McDonald's theories and the readiness to serve. If we don't have the men, we can't plow the snow. So I just wanted to share this with you guys, and the Transportation Committee's been chewing on this for 3 years, and I know we've been talking more and more about this. This is the one that is floating to the surface, if you want to say. John?
It's an education process. We're learning tonight, and I think our county people should be learning about this. So maybe an article in the newspapers occasionally will help out.
Thank you. And that's what I'd be doing, is asking for direction from the board. And that's what the Transportation Committee was looking at. If I can speak for the Transportation Committee, my coaches on that, or please correct me or piggyback onto that, if you would.
Mr. Cranmer.
Thank you. I was very interested in your presentation, and I'm with you. But I was wondering if any of the money will be going to the urban roads, as opposed
Answer would be no.
That would be designated for county roads, and we have some urban county roads, but that go through urban areas that are eligible for urban dollars. But each municipality can do the same. But this would be for county road and bridges and all the county jurisdiction type infrastructure.
would it include state roads?
No. We bill the state monthly on the work we do on their roads, on federal, state, and U.S. roads.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Highway Committee would really like some guidance from the Board of Supervisors if we should continue to pursue this or maybe back off on it, because an awful lot of time has been spent on it now, and there isn't much more that we can do in gathering of data. However, if the board would like us to continue with it, we would do it.
Mr. Stumpke.
Well, my guidance would be is I'm not interested in raising taxes on anybody until we've really took a serious look at controlling our expenditures, and I don't think we've done that. I would be willing, though, I think articles in the newspaper informing our constituents and a resolution on the next ballot that we can get it on and let the citizens in the county decide that.
You're suggesting a referendum question?
Yes.
Something to think about. Well, thank you for the informative. Do you have a summary or another ahoo moment?
Yahoo moment, yes, thanks. The points to ponder, and that's why we brought this forward, points to ponder, questions to consider, and since we're moving into the budget process, a couple final points that you'll probably be finding out as you're talking about this and thinking about what to do in your heart is that the state needs 120 days notice, and it is not a resolution, but Greg helped me out, it is a ordinance, and that would be required from the county board. And then one final point, if you in the state budget you will be hearing in the papers that they are pondering a $20 increase. And just remember that as you're looking through here, a $20 increase and whatever the county did added together. If you're going to do these types of comparisons, I don't want to fool anybody that it's just us that is looking at this. Because a year ago when I brought this up at the Towns Association, we had Kitty Rhodes after me, and she was dead set against it. But then I see on Thursday, June 7th, Hudson Star Observer, she says, it beats the alternative of paying higher gas tax. So I think she's starting to think differently than she did a year ago, and I appreciate her support. So, thank you.
You better be careful about characterizing that as support. She's not here to speak for herself. Okay, number 9 would be next. A resolution affirming county property coverage with local government property insurance fund. This is a pro forma, do it every year kind of thing, if I remember, Stan?
Yes, and this is a thing that we have to go through every year.
Authorizes us to continue to use that fund. So
Correct.
You're making the motion, Mr. Standifer seconding it. Any discussion? All in favor should now vote aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Senate Bill 122. This is also a Finance Committee resolution. Mr. Kruger, Mr. Standifer seconds it. You provide a handout in opposition, Mr. Strumke. Do you wish to make a statement as well?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I rise verbally in objection to this resolution. I did provide all the supervisors a letter. It may be a little confusing because I didn't actually write down the whereas. You had to actually compare the two to each other. I know it's late, so I was going to just read into the record for the citizens if they were still here, and of course I know it's taped and transmitted and stuff. But I'll go down, if you go down to the summation, and then I'll take a little bit of time after that. In my summation, I state that this is a bad resolution, and so is Senate Bill SB 211. It's important that when you consider your vote on this, you should consider this. This board has not recently supported any tax reduction. This county has one of the top authorized levy increases in the state, but still voted to borrow money in excess of this increase 2 years in a row. This board has not seriously considered any reductions in spending while continuing to support non-necessary programs that the private industry is capable of fulfilling. This board has been briefed that the single greatest need in the county is high-tech industry, but has done nothing to get it here. With that stated, does increasing taxes on business that encourage or discourage new business. In the interest of time, I'll end on my statement here, but it's time to start voting with a consideration for the long term and its effects on our community. Businesses are leaving the state and the country every minute. And it is because of regulations that government entities tack on them. Meanwhile, and in this case, we tell them that they want to use a law that the people enacted in 1953, and I don't think it's fair to say that that was an obscure law. Those legislators knew what they were doing then. If we want low pollution industries and any industries to come to Wisconsin, we need to make a favorable environment. If this is going to give up some taxes, then it's important to realize that if a business comes, they bring business and they bring employment. I owned a house in upstate New York. There was a paper mill there. That paper mill went out of business. My house value dropped 30%. Now, what do you think the effects on your real estate taxes in your communities are when businesses leave? And they do. And so it's easy to say that reducing, or I mean not allowing them to use this so that the community can get a little bit of tax. And just as a point, there's TIFs and all this other stuff we do for industry across this country. And their taxes they don't pay any. So they want to use it here. If they do it, the business stays there. The people stay employed. Other industries and commercial properties stay there, and the real estate value stays up. So SB 122 is not good for business, it's not good for communities, and it's not good for the tax base. I highly recommend, and I know I'm kind of confused when I talk, but I highly recommend that you vote down this resolution. The bill and the resolution are a bad idea.
Mr. Stanifer, are you rising to a point?
I didn't intend to rise. Do I need to? I take significant exception to the conclusions reached by the supervisor from District 17, and I fear that he's using a wide brush to paint a banister rail. This is a very narrow interpretation of a very specific loophole that is intended to be closed, whereas a paper mill is being asked to be declared a specific pollution abatement facility and ridding themselves of property taxes. Using that same logic, our business has sometimes been accused of being a paper mill, so I'm wondering if we could become a pollution abatement facility and not pay any property taxes. All kidding aside, one of the hallmarks of an equitable tax system is that there's fairness in the way taxes are collected. I'm not speaking as to whether taxes in the state of Wisconsin are too high or not. That could be a different discussion. But at least Wisconsin is an equalized valuation state. And it's pretty clear, whatever the value of your property is, that's the taxes you're going to pay. There are not categories that would go into some Orwellian direction, like Orwell wrote in Animal Farm, that yes, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. There ought to be an equitable system. And this certainly is an example of inequality where a very obscure law could be used to exempt a particular business, one business, from paying property tax. I find that very unfair. Second of all, I would take exception also to the comments of the supervisor from 17 that this board has not considered ways to reduce spending. Certainly the Finance Committee, and I believe this full board, every year goes through a great amount of pain and agony in attempting to reduce the spending to the level of available revenues that we have at our discretion, and that has been a hallmark, I think, of this board to be very careful and very prudent in spending. I would urge support of this resolution.
I broke my promise to not say anything tonight. I just have one quick I have one quick question on this. Much like the other tax bills that we talked about for cigarettes and beer, my question is, because this is going through the Senate, state Senate, is this support resolution coming from all the counties? Or is this just unique to somehow we found out about it and we have a resolution supporting it?
Yeah, I believe we received the resolution from Marathon County, but I've heard of several other counties discussing the same resolution from Marathon.
I agree with our previous supervisors, Mr. Standiford and Mr. Jordan. There is a loophole in this law, and if you do take this tax away from that commercial business, you're going to put it on the residential taxpayers, because somebody's going to have to come up with that tax. And there is a tax loophole here, and all they are trying to do is change the law so you don't have that pollution abatement facility of a paper company, not necessarily a bank, but I'm in support of this, and I hope all of you are in support of this.
Yep.
I ask for a roll call vote, please.
Esther Wentz?
Yes.
Gene Ritz?
Yes.
Gordon Awesome? Tom Kaflish?
Yes.
Chuck Strumke?
No.
Richard Marzov?
Yes.
Sharon Norton Bauman?
Yes.
Ron Troyer?
Yes.
Roger Rebholz?
Yes.
Bill Cranmer?
Yes.
Daryl Stanifer?
Yes.
John Borup?
Yes.
Clarence Malick?
Yes.
Don Jordan?
Yes.
Ron Raymond? Cindy Leonard?
Yes.
Linda Lucky?
Yes.
Stan Kruger?
Yes.
Denise Gunderson?
Yes.
Lois Burry?
Yes.
Brian Hurchin?
Yes.
Joel Hurchin?
Yes.
Jerry Peterson?
Yes.
Charlie Grant?
Yes.
Tom Dowd?
Yes.
Chuck Mills?
Yes.
Richard King?
Yes.
Wallace Habhager?
Yes.
John Mortensen?
No.
The motion passed.
May I will try to keep it brief. On June 12th, I attended the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting with two former county board members, Mr. Rich Peterson and Mr. Bob Stevens. Mr. Peterson was a county supervisor for 16 years and board chairman for 4.5 years. Mr. Bob Stevens served for many years as county supervisor and as a member of the Board of Adjustment. I wanted the Planning and Zoning Committee to hear firsthand from the former commissioners about the decisions they made in 1990 and their opinion that the current position of the county staff is inconsistent with the actions and intentions of the county board at that time. Mr. Peterson and Mr. Stevens came to give valuable statements that would have shed light on the decision that has been the subject of so much litigation. I think it's important for you to know that these gentlemen were barred from speaking. I think it's also important for you to know that when the committee went into closed session, Mr. Timmerman advised that I be excluded from that session because, in his opinion, I was on their side, that being the constituents at hand. After discussing my exclusion as an elected official from participating in a closed session of an elected body with the Wisconsin Attorney General, I have come to the conclusion that the exclusion is a violation of Wisconsin Code Chapter 19.89, Subchapter 5, General Duties of Public Officials. Please see the attached copy of page 30 of Chapter 19, which states, "No duly elected or appointed member of a governmental body may be excluded from any meeting of such body. Unless the rules of a governmental body provide to the contrary, no member of the body may be excluded from any meeting of a subunit of that governmental body." After reviewing the St. Croix County bylaws and rules on our website, the Attorney General did not find a provision to the contrary. In addition to asking Chairman Malick if he knew of any rules other than those set forth on our website. I also asked the county clerk if there were any further rules not published on our website. Furthermore, this is consistent with the information communicated at the board training that I was given last year upon my election. So far, no other rules have been provided to me that would indicate that any committee could exclude me or any other board member from any other county board or subunit meeting. A complaint to the Attorney General's office at this time would only be a distraction from the serious matter at hand, namely that the Court of Appeals found that St. Croix County invalidly drafted conditions in its own zoning ordinance, and therefore our constituents affected by it are about to be put out of business by a cease and desist order from the Planning and Zoning Department and the enforcement action of the Corporation Council. The evidence that I presented at the June 12th open session regarding this matter, which is public record, is attached to this letter for your review. I ask my fellow supervisors to request that the Planning and Zoning Committee invite our predecessors, Mr. Peterson and Mr. Stevens, to their next committee meeting to hear their testimony in open session in order to redraft the ordinance validly without putting our constituents out of business first. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman? Point of order, I mean no disrespect at all to the supervisor from District 15, but I inquire how we can deal with this if it's not on the agenda.
All we can take, according to our bylaws, is a question to be referred to a committee for a response 2 meetings later, not later than 2 meetings later. As I advised Mr. Awesome, is there a question that you are asking by this so that I can refer it to a committee?
Well, I am asking that the board put it on the agenda, and I am asking that the Planning and Zoning Committee do exactly what I said here. Take the testimony of these folks in our predecessors in open session. And if that needs to be referred to a committee of the board, so be it.
Still don't hear a question. Ms. Wentz.
Since this had already been brought to finance and was not passed, and nothing was brought forth from it, I would like to ask Mr. Timmerman to explain what Mr. Awesome is talking about as far as what these people would be able to bring back to this. After all, this has been through several court sessions, and the county has always been ruled that it was right. So I'd like to have Mr. Timmerman give his side of it.
No, all I wish to say is that Mr. Awesome has his facts very wrong, that the Court of Appeals held nothing close to saying that the county board did anything wrong. He's had that explained to him. Now, this will be the 3rd time, and he continues to refuse to accept that fact. There's nothing more that the Planning and Zoning Committee can do for this particular constituent. The opinion that I issued and was readily accepted by Mr. Awesome at the Planning and Zoning Committee was that he was advocating for a person who had an interest adverse to the county, and it would be ludicrous for him to sit in on a closed session when I'm advising the Planning and Zoning Committee on strategy to be adopted in litigation that may occur. I indicated to Mr. Awesome I might as well have the defense attorney come in and sit with us too, so he can listen to my strategy to the Planning and Zoning Committee. That's all I have to say.
Well, I don't think the statements.
Let me stop this. I only have the power under our rules and bylaws to take a question that is a legitimate yes or no or kind of a question, ends in a question mark, and refer it to a committee. I'm not hearing a question. There isn't a question posed. There's a statement and there's a request that a committee quote hear testimony. This does not seem to fit in the bylaws, and certainly an extended discussion of it would be a violation of the open meeting law. I'll give you one more chance, Mr. Awesome. Give me a question I can refer to a committee, or I'm going to declare it out of order and we'll go to the clerk's report of correspondence.
The question is, would the Planning and Zoning Committee please hear the testimony of the former board members that are in disagreement with the statements of the Corporation Council?
I will take your question under advisement and refer it if I feel it's appropriate, and live with the consequences. And with that, I'm going to truncate the discussion, lest to get deeper into the open meeting law issues of extended discussion of something. Now, do you have any county clerk's report of correspondence and zoning requests?
I have no correspondence. New rezoning applications submitted for Neil and Mary Jo Wilcoxon, Town of Troy, Egg to Egg Residential. Peter and Bridget Kling, Town of Ceylon, from Egg to Egg Residential. And I said I had no correspondence, but just a reminder on WECA conference attendance. If you're interested, please let me know. And I would like to have Supervisor Standifer and Supervisor Kruger's signatures on these resolutions before you leave, please.
So whether we meet on July 24th or on July 17th, in the day or the evening, is yet to be determined. We'll let you know just as soon as we can. Anybody have a charitable golf outing to announce, or any other light note to end on? Tomorrow? At the Hammond Golf Course? For the benefit of boys and girls in St. Croix County, right? Absolutely. All right. Anything else? See you sometime in July. Good night.